The signature sits on the glass conference table between them, still wet with ink. Imani St. Clair watches Kang Jun-woo's hand hover over the document, clause 17 underlined in red, the one that gives her full access to every sealed record from his father's era. Behind them, floor-to-ceiling windows frame Seoul's skyline at dusk, but Counselor Park Tae-jin stands in shadow, arms crossed, jaw tight. His voice cuts through the silence like broken glass. "Sajangnim, you're making a mistake that will destroy 4 generations of legacy." Jun-woo doesn't lift his eyes from the page. His Mont Blanc pen, the one his father used to sign the company's first billion-dollar deal, rests between his fingers. One signature. That's all it takes to hand over everything. The hidden accounts, the offshore transfers, the construction contracts that built half of Seoul on foundations nobody questioned. Imani keeps her expression neutral, but her pulse hammers against her throat. This moment shouldn't exist. 3 weeks ago, she didn't know his name. 3 weeks ago, she sat down in an airport lounge next to a stranger in a hoodie who looked like he was running from the world. He'd asked if she was running from someone or herself. She'd said she didn't run. She confronted. Now here they are, her audit file open on the table like evidence at trial, his entire empire balanced on the edge of exposure, and Park's network of board members watching via video conference, waiting for their golden boy CEO to protect the rot they've all profited from. The door opens. Lee Da-eun enters carrying a sealed manila folder, her expression carefully blank. She places it beside Jun-woo without a word, but Imani catches the micro gesture. Da-eun's finger taps the corner twice. Confirmation. The parallel file exists. Park notices too. His hand moves to his phone. "Before you make that call," Imani says, voice steady as surgery, "you should know that 3 copies of my preliminary findings have already been filed with independent parties, time-stamped, encrypted. If anything happens to this investigation, to me or to anyone in this room..." She lets the implication hang like smoke. Jun-woo finally looks up. Not at Park. At her. Their eyes meet across the table, and she sees it again. What she saw in that airport lounge at dawn when the world was quiet, and 2 strangers told each other truths they shouldn't have shared. Recognition. Not the kind that comes from knowing someone's name or title. The kind that sees straight through walls built over decades. He picks up the pen. "Jun-woo, Park says, switching to informal speech. A deliberate insult wrapped in false intimacy. "Your father would be ashamed." "My father," Jun-woo replies without breaking eye contact with Imani, "built something extraordinary. But if he built it on lies, then the only thing worse than discovering that truth would be protecting it." The pen touches paper. Park's voice turns to ice. "You sign that, and you sign your own destruction. The board will remove you by morning." Jun-woo's hand doesn't shake. "Then I'll be removed by a man who isn't afraid of the truth." The signature sweeps across clause 17 in one fluid motion. Irreversible. Binding. Done. Imani reaches for the document, but Park moves faster. His phone is already at his ear, rapid Korean sharp enough to cut. She catches words. Emergency session, mental instability, immediate suspension. Jun-woo stands, buttoning his suit jacket with the calm of someone who just bet everything and knows exactly what he's losing. He looks at her one more time, and his voice drops to something only she can hear. "I hope you find what you're looking for, even if it destroys me." The video screens flicker. One by one, the board members' faces disappear. All except Park's allies. 6 men in expensive suits who've just realized their golden boy has gone rogue. Da-eun's voice is barely a whisper. "Sajangnim, they've called a vote for 9 a.m. tomorrow." Imani slides the signed document into her leather portfolio, her fingers steady despite the earthquake beneath her ribs. She came to Seoul to expose corruption in a chaebol empire. She sat down next to its CEO by pure chance in an airport lounge. And now she's holding the weapon that will either save him or ensure they both go down burning. Park steps into the light, and his smile is a promise of war. "Ms. St. Clair." You've just made the worst professional decision of your life. I'll make sure every firm from New York to London knows you compromised an investigation for personal reasons. She meets his gaze without flinching. Counselor Park, I've made a career of being underestimated by men who think power makes them untouchable. You're about to learn why I've never lost a case. She walks toward the door, portfolio under her arm. Junwoo follows. Park doesn't stop them, but his voice trails after like smoke. The emergency board meeting is in 14 hours. I wonder, will you two be ready to lose everything? The elevator doors close on his smile. Imani and Junwoo stand in that glass box suspended between floors, between decision and consequence, between the beginning and whatever comes next. He breaks the silence. You didn't have to do this. Yes, she says quietly, watching Seoul's lights spread below them like stars. I did. Why? She turns to face him. This man she met by accident. This CEO whose empire is crumbling. This stranger who looked at her in an airport lounge like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years. Because someone once told me the truth is worth the risk. The elevator descends. 14 hours until the board votes. 14 hours until everything they've built and everything they've risked comes to its inevitable reckoning. And somewhere in a corner office far above them, Park picks up his phone and makes a call that will change the rules of the game they don't even know they're playing yet. If you're already feeling the weight of what Junwoo just risked, that impossible choice between legacy and truth, then you know this story is going to test them in ways that matter. Subscribe to hear more stories where people choose integrity, even when the world is watching, and stay with us to see if love can survive when power, reputation, and everything they've built hangs in the balance. Because what happens in the next 14 hours will define them both. 23 days earlier, Imani St. Clair didn't believe in fate. She believed in preparation, precedent, and the surgical precision of a well-documented case. At 34, she'd built her reputation as the investigator corporations called when they needed truth, not spin. Her track record was flawless. 12 major investigations, 12 exposures, 0 compromises. The last case, a pharmaceutical CEO who chose a bottle of pills over a trial, still haunted her nightmares, but she'd learned to live with ghosts. The Incheon Airport VIP lounge at 4:30 a.m. was a cathedral of silence. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed runways slick with October rain. The few travelers scattered across leather seating maintained that expensive quiet, the kind money buys along with first-class tickets and noise-canceling headphones. Imani rolled her Tumi carry-on past the reception desk, declined champagne, accepted ginger tea. She'd just survived 14 hours from London. 2 delayed connections, 1 lost meal, and 47 unread emails from a client who wanted her preliminary Seoul report yesterday. Her gray Tom Ford suit showed no evidence of the journey. She'd learned early that appearing unshakable was half the battle. Hair pulled into her signature low bun, minimal jewelry, reading glasses that made her look like what she was, someone who noticed everything. She scanned the lounge for the quietest corner. Her eyes landed on the far section, floor lamps casting warm light, charging ports available, only 1 occupant. A man in a black Balenciaga hoodie, baseball cap pulled low, medical mask covering most of his face. The universal uniform of someone who didn't want to be recognized. Perfect. She settled into the chair beside him, maintaining respectful distance. Set her tea on the side table. Opened her iPad to the file that would consume the next 6 weeks of her life. Hans-Young Conglomerate. Preliminary audit. The man shifted slightly. She caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else. Exhaustion. The kind that clings to people who haven't slept in days, who carry weight that doesn't show on scales. Her phone buzzed. Marcus Chen, her former mentor, calling at an ungodly hour. She answered quietly. Marcus, it's 4:30 in the morning. Then you're already in Seoul. Listen, about the Hans-Young case. I don't take guidance mid-investigation. You know that. His sigh crackled through the connection. I'm not guiding, I'm warning. These chaebols aren't like Western corporations. Family, legacy, national pride. It's all tangled together. If you start pulling threads, the whole tapestry comes down. That's not my problem. I find the truth. They decide what to do with it. Like the last time? His voice gentled. Imani, you can't save them from themselves. You can only give them information. What they do with it isn't my responsibility, I know. But her voice tightened around the words. She ended the call, took a breath, opened the file again. The numbers swam in front of tired eyes. Offshore accounts, construction subsidiaries, a web of transactions that looked clean on surface but felt wrong underneath. Like walking through a beautiful house and noticing the walls don't quite meet the ceiling. Rough night? The voice startled her. The man in the hoodie had lowered his mask, just slightly. Not enough for identification, but enough for conversation. His voice was rough, unused, like gravel under silk. She glanced over, saw tired eyes above the mask edge, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from carrying impossible choices. Rough job, she corrected. What kind of job requires reading financial reports at dawn in an airport lounge? A smile ghosted her lips despite herself. The kind that pays better than it should for the amount of coffee it requires. He laughed, a low, surprising sound. That's the most honest answer I've heard in months. She should have gone back to her file, should have maintained professional distance. But something about 4:30 a.m. and rain on runways and two strangers who'd never see each other again made her ask, "Are you running from someone or yourself?" He froze, then turned fully, pulling the mask down another fraction. She caught the edge of a defined jaw, lips pressed into a line that knew how to smile but had forgotten the root. Both, he admitted. And you? I don't run. I confront. It's my flaw and my profession. Corporate investigator? He gestured to her iPad. Independent auditor. I go where companies don't want me, find what they hope I won't, report what they wish didn't exist. That must make you popular. Popular is overrated. Respected keeps me employed. He leaned back, and she noticed his hands. No wedding ring, but the indent where one used to be. A watch that cost more than most cars. Fingers that tapped rhythms against his thigh like counting down to something inevitable. Do you ever wonder, he said quietly, if the truth does more damage than the lie? The question landed like a stone in still water. She turned to face him fully. Every single day. But I wonder more about the damage of living in a lie that eats you alive from the inside. His eyes met hers then, really met them. And something passed between them that had no name, no category, no professional explanation. Just recognition. Two people who carried similar weight, who understood the cost of integrity in a world that traded it like currency. I'm supposed to make a decision, he said, that affects 30,000 people. Their jobs, their families, their futures. And I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. What's the right choice? The one that destroys everything I've built but saves who I am? Or the one that saves everything I've built but destroys who I want to be? She set down her iPad. Those aren't the only options. There's usually a third path. It's just harder to see when you're standing in the middle of the crisis. And if there isn't, then you choose which version of yourself you want to see in the mirror when this is over. They sat in that shared silence. Two strangers telling each other truths they probably shouldn't, protected by the anonymity of dawn and departure gates. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated. In her line of work, names had power. But this man in a hoodie hiding from the world felt safe in a way she couldn't explain. Imani. That's beautiful. What does it mean? Faith. Ironically, given my profession. He smiled then, really smiled. And she saw the man beneath the exhaustion. Someone younger than the weight he carried. Someone who remembered how to find joy before the world made him responsible for everything. The lounge doors burst open. 3 men in dark suits, earpieces visible, moving with the coordinated precision of professional security. Behind them, 2 assistants, phones out, controlled panic in their efficient movements. Sajangnim, one of them said urgently. The media found out you're here. We need to leave through the private exit. Now. The man in the hoodie transformed before her eyes. The mask went up. The cap pulled lower. His posture shifted from tired human to guarded executive. He stood, and she caught the full height of him. Tall, commanding. Someone used to room standing when he entered. He looked at her one last time. It was good talking to someone real. Then he was gone, security flanking him. Assistants clearing the path, disappearing through doors Imani didn't even know existed. She sat alone in the quiet lounge, her tea cold, her heart beating strangely fast. Something made her pick up her phone. Search. CEO spotted Incheon Airport early morning. The results loaded. Her screen filled with a photo, security escorting someone in a black hoodie through private exits. The caption? Hanseong CEO Kang Jun-woo returns from emergency New York meetings. Board crisis deepens. Her blood turned to ice water. She scrolled. Found another photo, this one official, a press conference from 6 months ago. Kang Jun-woo in a Brioni suit, commanding a podium like he owned the air around it. Sharp features, intelligent eyes, the bearing of someone born to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. The same man she'd just shared dawn with. The same man who'd asked if truth did more damage than lies. The same man whose company she'd been hired to investigate. Whose financial records sat open on her iPad. Whose empire she was contracted to potentially expose or exonerate. Imani closed her eyes, opened them. The world hadn't changed, but everything in it had shifted slightly left of center. Her phone buzzed. Email from her client. Report expected in 6 weeks. Full access granted. Board cooperation mandatory. Find everything. She looked at the photo of Junwoo being escorted by security. Remembered his voice. I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. What the hell? She whispered to the empty lounge. Because she'd just met the man she was supposed to destroy. And worse, far worse, she'd felt something that had no place in her professional, carefully controlled, thoroughly documented life. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of timing and a cruel appreciation for irony. The Hanseong Tower occupied 43 floors of prime Seoul real estate, all steel and glass catching morning light like a blade. Imani stood across the street at 7:55 a.m., coffee in hand, armor fully assembled, charcoal Armani suit, hair immaculate. The expression she'd perfected over 12 investigations, professional curiosity with an edge sharp enough to cut through corporate bullshit. Yara's voice crackled through her earpiece. You good? Define good. Not spiraling about airport mystery man being target number 1. Imani crossed the street. I'm not spiraling. I'm recalibrating. That's what you said before the pharmaceutical case. Remember how that ended? Yara, I know. Do the job, maintain objectivity, truth above all else. I'm just saying, babe, if you felt something in that lounge. I didn't feel anything. It was 4:30 a.m. I was tired. He was a stranger. Who happens to run the company you're investigating? Which is why I'm compartmentalizing. He's not the man in the hoodie anymore. He's Kang Jun-woo, CEO. Subject of investigation. End of story. Yara's sigh carried 8 years of friendship. Your compartments have compartments. Just be careful. These chaebol families don't play by Western rules. Imani stepped into the lobby. Marble floors, a waterfall sculpture, security that tracked her movement with professional courtesy. Careful is my default setting. I'll call you after the initial meeting. The elevator to the executive floors required special access. The security guard checked her credentials 3 times, made 2 phone calls, then finally granted clearance. As the elevator climbed, Imani reviewed her strategy. Establish authority immediately, observe power dynamics, identify who's protecting what, and absolutely, under no circumstances, think about how Junwoo's eyes had looked when he said, I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. The 43rd floor was a study in minimalist power. Floor-to-ceiling windows, Abstract art that probably cost 6 figures, assistants moving with choreographed efficiency. A woman in a pearl gray suit approached, late 20s, sharp eyes, the posture of someone who managed chaos before it became visible. Ms. Sinclair, I'm Lee Da-eun, Executive Secretary to CEO Kang. The board is ready for you. Thank you. Imani followed her down a hallway where every step echoed against marble. How long have you worked for Mr. Kang? 4 years, since he assumed the CEO position. And before that? His father's administration. I was junior then. Imani filed that away. Someone who'd seen the transition, who knew where bodies were buried. Potentially an ally or obstacle depending on loyalty. Da-eun stopped at massive double doors. Ms. Sinclair, a word of advice? I'm listening. Councillor Park Tae-jin will try to control the narrative. He was the late chairman's closest advisor. He sees this audit as... She chose words carefully. An inconvenience. And CEO Kang? Something flickered in Da-eun's expression. Too fast to read. CEO Kang believes in transparency, but he's also protective of his father's legacy. It's complicated. It always is. Da-eun opened the doors. The boardroom was designed for intimidation. A glass conference table 30 feet long, leather chairs for 20, and windows framing Seoul like the city was just another asset on the books. 15 people turned as Imani entered, executives in expensive suits, lawyers with briefcases, and at the head of the table, Councillor Park Tae-jin. 61 years old, silver hair perfectly combed, thin gold-rimmed glasses that caught the light like warning signals. His smile was warm enough to fool anyone who wasn't looking closely. Imani was always looking closely. Ms. Sinclair, welcome to Hanseong. We've heard impressive things about your work. She set her portfolio on the table. You've heard I'm thorough, I assume. Among other descriptions, please sit. She remained standing. Old trick, never accept the position they offer until you've established your own terms. Before we begin, I need clarification on access parameters. My contract specifies full disclosure of all financial records from the past 20 years, including sealed files from the late chairman's era. Park's smile didn't falter, but his eyes cooled 10 degrees. That's quite comprehensive. That's my standard procedure. If Hansong has concerns about full transparency, we should address that now before I invest 6 weeks in an incomplete investigation. A lawyer leaned forward. Some of those files contain proprietary information, which I'm contractually bound to keep confidential, unless, of course, they contain evidence of illegal activity, in which case I'm legally obligated to report it. Silence fell like a blade. Then, from behind her, she's right. Imani's spine went rigid. She knew that voice. Rough silk, exhausted but commanding. She turned slowly, already knowing what she'd see. Kang Junwoo stood in the doorway, perfectly groomed now. Black Armani suit, burgundy tie, hair styled with the kind of precision that came from stylists who made house calls. No hoodie, no mask, just the full force of a CEO who'd inherited an empire at 35 and held it for 3 years against people who thought he was too young, too soft, too much his father's son. Their eyes met across the boardroom. Recognition flared. Instant, mutual, dangerous. She watched him process it. The woman from the airport lounge was the investigator. The stranger he'd shared truths with was the person who could destroy everything. His expression betrayed nothing. Whatever he felt, he locked it behind the mask of professional courtesy. Ms. Sinclair is here because the board wants transparency. If we limit her access, we undermine the entire purpose of the investigation. He moved to the head of the table, not Park's end, the opposite side. Strategic positioning. Full access to all records as contracted. Anyone who has concerns can raise them with me directly. Park's jaw tightened microfractions. Junwoo, some of those files contain sensitive family matters. Then we'll explain the context, but we won't hide them. Junwoo's voice carried the weight of someone who'd argued this battle before. Ms. Sinclair, please sit. Let's establish parameters. She took the seat directly across from him, close enough to see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands rested flat on the table like anchoring himself. Park cleared his throat. Perhaps we should begin with introductions. Ms. St. Clair, you've met myself, Counselor Park Tae-jin, Head of Strategic Advisory. To my left is Kang Min-ho, Vice President of Operations and CEO Kang's younger brother. Min-ho was 33, but looked younger, with looser posture and a smile that came easier. Ms. St. Clair, thank you for taking this case. We're eager for an objective assessment. Eager or anxious? Imani noted the distinction. The introductions continued. CFO, General Counsel, Head of Construction, Media Relations. 15 people who all had something to lose or gain from her findings. When it was her turn, she stood. Imani St. Clair, Independent Auditor. I've conducted 12 major corporate investigations. My methodology is simple. I follow documentation, track financial patterns, and interview key personnel. I don't work with theories or assumptions. I work with evidence. At the end of 6 weeks, you'll receive a comprehensive report detailing my findings. What you do with that information is your decision, not mine. My only obligation is to accuracy. And discretion? Park asked smoothly. Confidentiality is contractual. Unless I find evidence of ongoing illegal activity that poses imminent harm, everything stays within this room until the report is delivered. Junwoo leaned forward slightly. What qualifies as imminent harm? She met his eyes, felt that crackle of recognition again, pushed it down. Active money laundering, ongoing fraud that affects public investors, safety violations that risk lives. I'm an auditor, not law enforcement, but I won't be complicit in covering up active crimes. Fair, Junwoo said. Then to the room. Full cooperation. Ms. St. Clair gets access to everything she requests. Da-yoon will coordinate logistics. Park's smile was all teeth. How thorough. I'm sure we'll all rest easier knowing such an uncompromising investigator is reviewing our practices. The word uncompromising landed like a challenge. Imani gathered her portfolio. Gentlemen, I'll need workspace, access credentials, and the last 20 years of financial records by end of business today. I'll begin comprehensive review tomorrow morning. Da-eun nodded. I'll have everything prepared. As the meeting dissolved, Imani felt the weight of 15 gazes tracking her exit, but the only one that mattered, the only one that burned like pressure between her shoulders, was Junwoo's. She didn't look back. Couldn't afford to. In the elevator, alone, she let out the breath she'd been holding. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Thank you for 4:30 a.m. It was the last honest conversation I've had in 6 months. Whatever you find, I hope you don't regret sitting next to me. JW. Imani stared at the screen, deleted the message, then immediately regretted it because evidence mattered, even emotional evidence, especially when the elevator doors opened. Park Tae-jin stood in the hallway, alone. Ms. St. Clair, a moment? She stepped out. Counselor Park. He walked slowly, hands clasped behind his back. I want you to understand something. Hansong isn't just a company. It's a legacy. 4 generations, 30,000 employees, a symbol of Korea's economic miracle. The late Chairman Kang built this from rubble after the war. I understand the stakes. Do you? He stopped, turned. Because you carry a reputation for collateral damage. The last CEO you investigated chose suicide over exposure. Her jaw tightened. He made that choice. Not me. But you lit the match that started the fire. Park's voice was soft, almost fatherly. I'm not suggesting you compromise your investigation. I'm simply suggesting you consider the human cost of absolute truth. Sometimes mercy is wiser than justice. And sometimes mercy is just another word for complicity. Park studied her for a long moment. You and CEO Kang have something in common. You both believe the world is simpler than it is. Right and wrong, black and white. But families are built in shades of gray, Ms. St. Clair. Remember that when you start pulling threads. He walked away, leaving her alone in the marble hallway, Seoul spreading out below through windows that showed everything and revealed nothing. Her phone buzzed again. Yara. How'd it go? Imani typed back. Met the man from the airport, in a boardroom, as target of investigation. 3 dots. Then, oh honey, you're so screwed. Imani pocketed her phone and headed for the elevator. Screwed didn't even begin to cover it. But she'd never walked away from a case. Wasn't about to start now. Even if the man she was investigating looked at her like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years, and even if she was starting to look back the same way. Truth first. Always. Even when it burned. The office they'd assigned Imani was a glass box on the 41st floor. Transparent walls, minimalist desk. A view that reminded her she was being watched. She'd worked in hostile environments before. This was just more elegant about it. By end of day, Da-eun delivered 20 years of financial records, 3 external hard drives, and a stack of physical files that required a cart. Imani spent 3 days doing what she did best, reading between numbers, tracking patterns, following money through corporate labyrinths designed to confuse anyone who wasn't looking for exits. Day 4, she found the first thread. A construction subsidiary, Hansong Engineering and Development, showed quarterly transfers to an offshore consulting firm. Nothing illegal on surface. Consulting fees were normal. But the amounts were too round, too consistent, and the consulting firm's business registration was 6 months newer than the first payment. Shell company. Probably. She pulled the subsidiary's full transaction history. The pattern went back 15 years, starting small and escalating steadily. By year 12, the amounts jumped significantly. Year 12 was 3 years ago, right when Junwoo became CEO. But the authorization signatures on the older transfers weren't his. They belonged to someone with initials PTJ Park Taejin. Imani sat back, coffee cold, Seoul's sunset painting her glass office in amber. This was it. The thread. Pull it, and either everything would unravel or the sweater would hold. But she needed more context before labeling it evidence. Her office phone rang. Internal line. Ms. St. Clair, CEO Kong would like to see you in his office. She glanced at the clock. 7:30 p.m. Most of the floor had emptied hours ago. Now? He said whenever you have a moment. No rush. Imani saved her files, locked her computer, took the stairs instead of the elevator because she needed 60 seconds to rebuild her professional walls. Junwoo's office occupied the northwest corner, twice the size of the boardroom, with a living area that probably doubled as a place to sleep when deals went past midnight. He stood at the window, tie loosened, jacket gone, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. The posture of exhaustion. "You wanted to see me?" she said from the doorway. He turned. Up close, without the armor of full suit and boardroom, he looked more like the man from the airport lounge. Tired, human, complicated. "I wanted to apologize for not warning you. About the airport." She stayed in the doorway. "You didn't know who I was. I knew someone was coming to investigate the company. I should have guessed." "Why would you guess that a stranger at 4:30 a.m. was your auditor?" A faint smile. "Because you ask the kind of questions someone asks when they're used to finding things people hide." She couldn't argue that. "May I ask you something?" He said carefully. "What you said in the lounge, about choosing which version of yourself you want to see in the mirror. Did you mean that?" "Yes. Do you follow your own advice?" The question landed like a stone in deep water. "I try to. It's not always easy." He moved to his desk, picked up a file. "This is my father's last financial report before he died. Heart attack at his desk, late night, alone. The official story is he worked himself to death building this empire." He set the file down. "I've read this report 100 times. The numbers are clean. Everything balances. But something feels wrong. and I can't articulate what. Why are you telling me this? Because you're here to find what's wrong. And I need you to find it, even if it destroys the image of my father that I've been protecting for 3 years. This was a gift. He was telling her where to look, or giving her permission to look without holding back. Mr. Kang, Junwoo, when it's just us, you can use my name. That's not appropriate given our professional relationship. What happened in the airport lounge wasn't appropriate either, but it was real. He met her eyes. I'm not asking you to compromise your investigation. I'm asking you to be as honest with me as you were with a stranger at dawn, because I don't have many people I can trust to tell me the truth without agenda. Imani weighed the risk. Everything in her training said maintain distance. But everything in her gut, the same gut that had found 12 corporate cover-ups, said this man was genuinely asking for help navigating his own family's rot. I found something today, she said. A pattern in your construction subsidiary. Transfers to an offshore firm that might be a shell. The signatures are old, before you were CEO. His expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened against the desk edge. How old? 15 years, escalating significantly around year 12. 3 years before I took over. Yes. He sat down slowly. My father signed off on construction contracts personally. He didn't delegate that authority until the year before he died. Who did he delegate it to? Park Tae-jin. He'd been my father's advisor for 30 years. My father trusted him like a brother. The pieces were assembling into a picture neither of them wanted to see. I need access to the original construction contracts, Imani said. Physical copies if they exist. And I need to know who currently has signatory authority over that subsidiary. Minho, my brother. I gave it to him 2 years ago because I thought it would help him build confidence in a leadership role. Junwoo's voice was steady, but his eyes held the weight of implications. Are you telling me my brother or my father's closest advisor has been embezzling from the company for over a decade? I'm telling you there's a pattern that needs explanation. Don't jump to conclusions until I have evidence. But your instinct says something's wrong. My instinct says follow the money. It always tells the truth eventually. He stood, moved to a wall panel, pressed his palm to a biometric scanner. The panel slid open, revealing a safe. He pulled out a leather-bound folder, handed it to her. Original construction contracts from my father's era. The only copies are in the legal archives, but those can be accessed by Park and the board. These are personal copies my father kept. No one knows I have them. Imani took the folder. Why are you giving me this? Because in that airport lounge, you told me to choose which version of myself I want to see in the mirror. His voice dropped. I want to be the version that finds truth even when it costs everything. Can you help me do that? She looked at this man, this CEO carrying impossible weight, this stranger who trusted her at dawn, this subject of her investigation who was handing her the keys to potentially destroying his family's legacy. Yes, she said quietly, but you need to understand something. If I find evidence of crimes, I have to report it. I can't protect your father's memory or your family's reputation. I can only protect the truth. I know. And if the truth is that your father or your brother or Park built this empire on fraud, then I'll deal with that when it's proven. But I won't live in willful ignorance. They stood in that moment, two people on the edge of something that could save them or destroy them, and neither quite sure which direction they were falling. Imani's phone buzzed. Message from Da-eun. Counselor Park requesting meeting with you tomorrow, 9 a.m. Subject: concerns about investigation scope. She showed Junwoo the screen. He's going to try to limit my access. He can try. I'll override him. That will create a problem. I'm the CEO. I'm allowed to create problems. A smile ghosted her lips despite everything. You know this isn't going to be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. He walked her to the door, maintained professional distance, but something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition of shared risk. Imani? She paused. Thank you. For sitting next to me in that lounge. For being honest. For not running when you found out who I was. I told you. I don't run. No, he said softly. You confront, even when it costs you. She left his office carrying original contracts and the weight of a choice she was already making, to help him find truth even if it meant watching his world burn. In the elevator, alone, she opened the leather folder. The first contract was dated 18 years ago. The signature at the bottom was Chairman Kang's, Junwoo's father. The approval stamp beside it, Park Tae-jin. And in the margins, in faded ink, a handwritten note. Confirm offshore transfer before final payment. Keep separate from main books. Imani's heart hammered, because she'd just found evidence that the man Junwoo called family's closest advisor, the man who sat at the head of that boardroom table, had been running a scheme since before Junwoo was even in the company. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Whatever you're about to find, remember that mercy is wiser than justice. PTJ. The threat was clear. Park knew she was digging, and he was preparing his defenses. But threats had never stopped Imani St. Clair before. They only confirmed she was looking in the right place. She just hoped Junwoo was ready for what that truth was going to cost him. Park Tae-jin's office was a study in traditional power. Dark wood furniture, calligraphy scrolls on silk, a tea set older than the company itself. The message was clear. I was here before you, and I'll be here after. Imani sat across from him at 9 a.m. precisely. Declined tea, kept her portfolio closed. Thank you for meeting, Park began, voice warm as honey. I wanted to discuss some concerns about the investigation's direction. I'm listening. You've been requesting access to very old files, contracts from Chairman Kang's early years. I'm concerned this might be, he chose words delicately, overreach. The board hired you to audit current financial health, not excavate ancient history. Financial patterns often have roots in historical decisions. I need full context to provide accurate assessment. Of course, but you must understand. Some of those early contracts involve sensitive negotiations with government entities, international partners. Exposing them now could damage relationships that took decades to build. I'm contractually obligated to confidentiality, unless you find what you deem illegal activity. Park's smile remained, but his eyes were calculating. And illegal is such a fluid term, isn't it? What was standard practice 20 years ago might look questionable through today's lens. That doesn't mean it was criminal at the time. Imani leaned forward slightly. Counselor Park, are you asking me to apply contextual ethics to potential evidence of fraud? I'm asking you to apply wisdom, discretion, understanding that this company employs 30,000 families who depend on Hanseong's reputation remaining intact. And if that reputation was built on illegal activity? His mask slipped, just a fraction. You're very young to be so certain about moral absolutes. I'm old enough to have seen what happens when people excuse corruption because it's complicated. Silence stretched between them like a blade. Park set down his teacup with deliberate care. I've done some research on you, Ms. St. Clair. Your last investigation, the pharmaceutical CEO who took his own life. That must have been traumatic. Her spine went rigid. That's not relevant to this case. Isn't it? You found evidence of fraud, reported it, and a man died. His family lost their father. His company collapsed. Thousands lost jobs. All because you couldn't find a way to resolve the situation that preserved both truth and mercy. He chose death over public destruction. Can you say with certainty your report didn't contribute to that choice? The words hit like physical blows. Imani kept her expression neutral, but inside, old wounds split open. I can say, she replied carefully, that covering up fraud to protect a CEO's reputation would have been complicity. I made the choice I could live with. And yet you still have nightmares, I'd wager. Park's voice was almost gentle. I'm not trying to hurt you, Ms. St. Clair. I'm trying to help you understand that this situation is different. The Kang family isn't corrupt. They're human. And humans make choices in gray areas that absolute truth can't accommodate. Is there something specific you're concerned I'll find? I'm concerned you'll misinterpret normal business practices as conspiracy. I'm concerned you'll destroy a family legacy because you're looking for patterns where there's only pragmatic decision-making. Then you have nothing to worry about. My reports are evidence-based. That's what concerns me. Park stood, moved to his window. CEO Kang is young, idealistic. He believes in transparency because he hasn't yet learned that some truths cause more damage than strategic silence. He's giving you access to files that should remain sealed because he thinks honesty will vindicate the family. He doesn't understand that digging up the past will only hurt the present. He understands more than you think. Park turned sharply. Has he been speaking with you privately? The question was a trap. Admit it, and she'd confirm collusion. Deny it, and she'd lie. I speak with many people during investigations, she said neutrally. It's part of comprehensive analysis. Of course. But his eyes calculated something new. Just remember, Ms. St. Clair, CEO Kang is your subject, not your ally. Whatever personal rapport you might feel, your job is to assess the company, not save him from difficult truths about his family. She stood, gathered her portfolio. My job is to find facts. What anyone does with those facts is their decision. Just like the pharmaceutical CEO? The barb landed perfectly. Imani walked to the door, paused. Counselor Park, if there's something specific you want to tell me about Han Seong's financial practices, now would be the time. Because once I finish my investigation, anything that wasn't disclosed becomes significantly more damaging. There's nothing to disclose. I just hope you'll remember that mercy is a virtue, even for investigators. She left his office feeling the weight of the conversation like bruises. He'd been careful. No direct threats, no explicit admissions. But the message was clear. I know your weaknesses. I will use them if you push too far. Back in her glass office, she found an envelope on her desk. No sender, just her name in printed letters. Inside, a USB drive and a note printed on plain paper. The cafe 2 blocks east. Tomorrow, 6 a.m. Come alone. Don't tell anyone, especially not CEO Kang. This is for your protection and his. No signature, no identification. Just a USB drive that could contain evidence or a trap. Imani plugged it into her isolated laptop, the one with no network connection, designed specifically for suspicious files. The drive contained a single folder. Airport, Incheon, Lounge 10. 15. Her blood went cold. Inside, photos. 15 high-resolution images of the airport VIP lounge at dawn. Her sitting beside a man in a hoodie. The angle showed both their faces clearly. Timestamps, 4:32 a.m. through 4:51 a.m. Someone had been watching, photographing, documenting, and they'd waited until now to reveal it. Maximum leverage at maximum vulnerability. Imani's hands shook as she scrolled through images. The last photo showed Junwoo leaving with security, his mask down, his face visible. Her expression in the frame, surprised recognition beginning to dawn. The message was clear. I have proof you met the subject of your investigation before the case began. I have proof of personal connection, and if I release these photos, your credibility is destroyed, your career is finished, and Junwoo's authority is compromised by appearing to have personal relationship with his investigator. Her phone buzzed. Daun. CEO Kang requesting your presence in his office. Urgent. Imani closed the laptop, pocketed the USB drive, took 3 breaths, rebuilt her walls. When she entered Junwoo's office, he was pacing. Minho sat on the couch, expression tight. Lee Da-eun stood by the window, tablet in hand. Close the door, Junwoo said. She did. What happened? He handed her his phone. On screen, a message from an unknown number. Your investigator isn't as objective as she claims. Ask her about the airport lounge. Ask her what she and Junwoo discussed before the investigation began. Ask her if she disclosed their prior meeting to the board. The photos will be released in 72 hours, unless the investigation is terminated immediately. Imani felt the floor drop from under her feet. Minho looked between them. Is this true? You two met before she was assigned? We were in the same airport lounge, Imani said carefully. For approximately 20 minutes. We didn't exchange names. I didn't know who he was until after the initial board meeting. But you recognized him in the boardroom, Minho pressed, and you didn't disclose it. There was nothing to disclose. It was a random encounter. That someone photographed extensively. Junwoo's voice was controlled, but she heard the strain beneath. Someone who's now using it as blackmail to stop the investigation. Which tells you everything you need to know, Imani said. Someone is desperate enough to threaten both of us because they know I'm close to finding something they don't want found. Da-eun spoke up quietly. The envelope on your desk this morning, unsigned. I saw security footage. It was delivered by bike courier. No trace. There's a meet planned, Imani admitted. Tomorrow, 6 a.m., anonymous. They want to talk. Absolutely not, Junwoo said immediately. That's a trap. Or it's someone with information who's afraid to come forward officially. Or it's Park setting you up for worse leverage. You think it's Park? I think Park has the resources and the motivation. Junwoo stopped pacing, faced her directly. Imani, this is about to get dangerous. Whoever is behind this isn't playing corporate games anymore. They're willing to blackmail, threaten, potentially worse. I need you to consider pausing the investigation until... No. Listen. No. Her voice was steel. This is exactly what they want. Threaten us. Make us afraid. Force us to back down. I've faced this before. If I stop every time someone tries to intimidate me, I'd never complete an investigation. This isn't just intimidation, Minho interjected. These photos could destroy both your careers. They're claiming impropriety. Let them claim it, Imani shot back. We did nothing wrong. 20 minutes in an airport lounge doesn't constitute conflict of interest. We didn't discuss the investigation because I didn't know there was one. We didn't exchange identifying information. It was a random encounter. That will look incredibly convenient to anyone who wants to discredit your findings, Minho said. Junwoo held up a hand. Minho's right about optics, but Imani's also right about backing down. If we terminate the investigation under blackmail, we confirm that there's something to hide. He turned to Imani. But I'm not letting you walk into that cafe alone. If it's a setup, then having you there makes it worse, she countered. It proves we're collaborating beyond professional bounds. I don't care. I do. My career is built on credibility. I won't compromise that. They stared at each other across his desk. Two stubborn people who'd both learned to stand alone, now facing a situation that required trust neither was practiced at giving. Da-eun cleared her throat. If I may suggest a compromise, I'll accompany Ms. St. Clair to the cafe. I'm already publicly associated with the investigation as liaison. My presence wouldn't raise additional flags. I can position myself nearby, close enough to intervene if necessary, far enough to maintain plausible deniability. Imani considered. That could work. I still don't like it, Junwoo said. You don't have to like it. You just have to let me do my job. Imani's voice softened slightly. I appreciate the concern, but I've navigated hostile situations before. This is what I do. Minho stood. I should go. This is clearly beyond my clearance level. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, Hyung, I believe her. About the airport. No one could fake the surprise I saw in this room when you walked into that board meeting. After he left, silence settled heavy. He called you Hyung, Imani noted. That's the first time I've heard him use informal speech with you. He usually maintains professional distance. Junwoo moved to the window. He thinks it makes him look more independent, more capable. He doesn't realize I gave him the construction subsidiary because I trust him, not because I'm trying to keep him busy. Does he know about the offshore transfers? No. And I'd like to keep it that way until you have complete evidence. If he's innocent, then learning his authority was used for embezzlement will hurt him. And if he's not, don't. Junwoo's voice was sharp. Minho has his insecurities, but he's not a criminal. I'm not accusing him. I'm being thorough. By suspecting my brother, by suspecting everyone until evidence eliminates them. She moved closer. Junwoo, I know this is personal. Family is always personal. But I need you to let me follow the investigation wherever it leads, even if it leads to my brother or my father, or destroys everything I thought I knew about my family. He closed his eyes. I know. I just didn't think it would be this hard this fast. Imani found herself wanting to comfort him, to close the distance, to offer the kind of support that crossed every professional line she'd ever drawn. She stepped back instead. I should go. Prep for tomorrow's meeting. Imani. He caught her wrist, light touch, easily broken. Be careful, please. Whoever is behind this has resources in reach. They've been watching us. They know things they shouldn't. That means someone close is feeding them information. I know. Do you? Because if it's Park, he has access to everything. Security, communications, personnel files. If it's someone else on the board, same problem. And if it's... He stopped. If it's your brother? I was going to say if it's someone we haven't even considered yet. But his expression said she'd guessed his fear correctly. She pulled her wrist free gently. 6 a.m. tomorrow. I'll have answers or better questions. Either way, we'll know more. And the 72-hour deadline? Let them release the photos if they want. I'll issue a statement. Chance airport encounter, no discussion of confidential matters, full disclosure to legal team. It'll be a headline for a day, then fade when my report delivers actual substance. You're betting your reputation on that. I'm betting my reputation on my work being thorough enough that no one can discredit it based on coincidental airport seating. She managed a faint smile. Besides, I've faced worse odds. After she left, Junwoo stood alone in his office, watching Seoul's lights flicker on as sunset bled into twilight. He picked up his father's file again. The last financial report before the heart attack. Clean numbers, perfect balance, everything exactly where it should be. But Imani was right. Something felt wrong. And now he was terrified that the something wrong was the foundation of everything he'd spent 3 years trying to honor. His phone buzzed. Message from the unknown number. 72 hours. The choice is simple. Her career or your family's secrets. Choose wisely. Junwoo deleted the message. Then immediately regretted it, because evidence mattered. He was learning that from her. Even when it hurt. The cafe was called Saebyuk, Dawn, which felt like the universe's idea of heavy-handed symbolism. Imani arrived at 5:50 a.m., ordered black coffee, took a corner table with clear sightlines to all entrances. Da-eun was positioned 3 tables away, hidden behind a newspaper and noise-canceling headphones that were actually recording devices. 6 a.m. came and went. 6:15, 6:30. Imani's coffee went cold. Her instincts prickled. This felt wrong. At 6:45, her phone buzzed. Not a call, a notification, her news alert app. Breaking. Hanseong CEO and investigator in conflict of interest scandal. Photos reveal secret airport meeting before investigation began. Her blood turned to ice. The article loaded. Every single photo from the USB drive. Published on 3 major Korean news sites simultaneously. Her face, Junwoo's face, timestamps proving they met before the investigation. The angle of their body language suggesting intimacy, familiarity, connection. The text was carefully worded to avoid direct accusation while implying everything. Questions arise about investigator objectivity. Prior relationship undisclosed to board. CEO's judgment questioned. Calls for independent review. Her phone exploded. 15 calls in 2 minutes. Messages flooding. Emails from clients, colleagues, her firm's legal team. Da-yoon appeared at her table, tablet out. It's everywhere. Korean media, international business press, even social media. Someone coordinated this release for maximum impact. They never intended to meet, Imani said, voice hollow. This was always the plan. Get me here, away from damage control, then release everything while I'm isolated. We need to get you back to the building. Issue a statement. Imani's phone rang. Marcus Chen, she answered. Tell me it's not as bad as it looks, he said without preamble. It's exactly as bad as it looks and completely innocent. Innocent doesn't matter when the photos look like that. Imani, I'm getting calls from 3 different clients asking if you're compromised. Your firm is in crisis mode. The managing partners want you to terminate the Hansong investigation immediately and return to London. No. This isn't negotiable. Marcus, listen to me. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to photograph a random airport encounter, sit on that evidence for weeks, then coordinate a media release designed to destroy credibility right when I'm close to finding actual corruption. That's not coincidence. That's desperation. Or that's a guilty CEO manipulating an investigator who got emotionally compromised. The accusation stung because she'd been asking herself the same question. Do you believe that? Silence. Then, no. But it doesn't matter what I believe. It matters what the court of public opinion believes. And right now, they believe you're either incompetent for not disclosing or complicit in covering for someone you're personally involved with. I'm not personally involved. The photos suggest otherwise. The photos show 2 people talking in a public lounge. There's no physical contact. No. Imani. His voice gentled. I've known you for 8 years. I trained you. I've seen you operate under hostile conditions. And I'm telling you, as someone who cares about your career and your well-being, you need to extract yourself from this situation before it gets worse. It's already worse, and extracting now proves I had something to hide. Staying proves you're emotionally compromised. She ended the call, stared at her phone as more notifications flooded in. Da-eun was typing rapidly on her tablet. CEO Kang has issued a statement. Ms. St. Clair and I encountered each other briefly in a public space prior to the investigation. Neither of us was aware of the other's identity at the time. There was no discussion of confidential matters. Ms. St. Clair disclosed this encounter to Hanseong's legal team upon recognition, and we determined it did not constitute conflict of interest. Her investigation continues with full board support. He's lying, Imani said. I didn't disclose it to legal. He's protecting you, and himself. But, Da-eun showed her the tablet. The board is calling an emergency session. Councillor Park has demanded your immediate removal and replacement with a firm that has no prior contact with company leadership. Of course he had. When's the session? 2 hours, 10 a.m. Then I have 2 hours to find something so compelling they can't ignore it regardless of optics. Ms. St. Clair, I don't think you understand the severity. I understand perfectly. My career is burning. My reputation is in question. Every finding I produce will now be scrutinized for bias. Imani stood, threw cash on the table. Which means my only option is to find evidence so clean, so documented, so irrefutable that no one can claim it's fabricated or influenced by personal connection. You can do that in 2 hours? I can if you help me. You said you've been filing documents incorrectly, creating a parallel file. I need to see it. Now. Da-eun hesitated, then nodded. My apartment is 10 minutes from here. Everything's on an encrypted personal drive. They left the cafe just as a news van pulled up, cameras ready. Imani kept her head down, moved fast. But she caught the reporter's voice. Scandal that has rocked one of Korea's most prestigious chaebols, raising questions about corporate governance and investigative ethics. In the taxi, Imani called Junwoo. He answered on the first ring. Are you safe? Physically, yes. Professionally, no. I saw your statement. It was the only move. If I throw you under the bus, the investigation dies and Park wins. If I support you, we at least have a chance of... Junwoo. She cut him off. Thank you, but you need to know. I'm about to make this worse before it gets better. I'm going after the proof. Hard. Fast. Whatever I find in the next 2 hours gets presented to that board meeting, and it's not going to be subtle. What did you find? I'll know in 90 minutes. Just be ready. For whatever comes next. She ended the call before he could argue. Da-eun's apartment was a tiny, efficient space filled with filing systems that would make professional archivists weep with joy. She unlocked a fireproof safe, pulled out an external hard drive, plugged it into her laptop. I started noticing inconsistencies 3 years ago, she explained, pulling up folders, right after CEO Kang took over. Little things. Documents that should have been filed together but weren't. Payments that matched amounts but had different dates than the corresponding invoices. Board meeting minutes that referenced decisions not recorded in official files. Why didn't you report it? To who? If it was coming from Councillor Park, reporting to the board meant reporting to him. If it was coming from the late chairman, I'd be accusing a dead man that everyone revered. And if it was CEO Kang? She paused. I didn't think it was, but I couldn't prove it, so I kept copies. Everything that felt wrong, I duplicated and stored privately. That's illegal. So is embezzlement. Da-eun met her eyes. I've worked for the Kang family for 6 years. The chairman was a good man who made hard choices. Min-ho is sweet, but weak. And Junwoo, her voice softened. He's trying so hard to be worthy of something he already earned. I couldn't let him get destroyed by something he didn't do without at least having evidence of the truth. Imani scanned the files. Construction contracts, offshore transfers, board approvals, 3 years of discrepancies that individually looked like clerical errors, but collectively formed a pattern. Here. She stopped on a file dated 4 years ago, 1 year before Junwoo became CEO. This construction contract for the Gangnam Tower project. It's signed by the chairman and approved by Park. But look at the payment schedule. Da-eun leaned in. The final payment is 30% higher than contracted, and routed through the same offshore consulting firm I've been tracking. But this payment is dated 2 weeks after the chairman's death, which means someone else authorized it using the chairman's documented approval, someone with access to his files and signatory authority during the transition period. They scrolled faster, pulling every construction contract from the year of the chairman's death. 7 projects, all with final payments exceeding contracted amounts, all routed through offshore accounts, all authorized after the chairman died but before Junwoo officially took over. The transition period, Imani said. Who had acting authority? Councillor Park. He was appointed interim CEO for the 3 months between the chairman's death and the board vote confirming Junwoo. 3 months is a long time to move money. Long enough to skim $17 million across 7 projects without anyone noticing during the chaos of leadership transition. Imani pulled up the offshore consulting firm's registration. This company was created 6 months before the chairman died. Someone was planning this in advance. Or the chairman was involved and Park just continued. No. Imani pointed at the screen. Look at the registered agent. It's a law firm in Singapore. Same firm that represented Han Seong in an unrelated contract dispute 15 years ago. Park would have known them. The chairman wouldn't. He delegated all international legal matters to Park. They looked at each other as pieces fell into place. Park created a shell company using firm contacts the chairman gave him access to, Da-eun said slowly. He embedded it in construction contracts over several years, small amounts that could be explained as consulting fees. Then when the chairman died, he had a 3-month window where he controlled everything. He escalated, got greedy, moved $17 million in 90 days because he knew once Junwoo took over, oversight would tighten. But he didn't count on Junwoo being so committed to transparency that he'd hire an external auditor. Imani pulled all the files onto a USB drive. Or that the CEO's secretary was secretly documenting irregularities. Or that his investigator would sit next to the CEO in an airport lounge by pure chance, creating a connection that couldn't be threatened away. Imani checked the time. 1 hour until the board meeting. Her phone was still exploding with notifications, her reputation burning in real time across international news. But she had evidence. Real, documented, irrefutable proof that Councillor Park had been embezzling from Han Seong for at least 4 years, escalating dramatically during the leadership transition, and using the late chairman's legacy as cover. "We need to get this to Junwoo before the board meets," she said. "If we show up together, it confirms every accusation about collusion. Then you deliver it. I'll go separately. We'll present independently." Da-eun copied the files to a second drive. "Ms. St. Clair? For what it's worth, I think you're exactly what this company needed. Someone who can't be bought or scared into silence. I hope the board agrees, because this is about to get ugly." They left separately. Imani took a taxi back to Hanseong Tower, watching news coverage on her phone. Her face everywhere. Speculation running wild. Colleagues she'd worked with for years now questioning her integrity in carefully worded statements. The pharmaceutical CEO's daughter had issued a statement. "My father died because Ms. St. Clair cared more about her reputation than people's lives. I hope Hanseong CEO Kang realizes what kind of person he's trusting before it's too late." Each word landed like a blade in old wounds. But beneath the pain, beneath the fear of losing everything she'd built, there was clarity. This was why she did this work. Not for reputation. Not for accolades. For moments like this when truth mattered more than comfort, and someone had to be willing to burn to bring it into light. She'd burned before. She could burn again. As long as the truth survived the fire. The board meeting was chaos barely contained by corporate protocol. 15 board members, 6 lawyers, a crisis management team, and security that looked ready for physical altercation. Imani entered to hostile stares and satisfied smirks in equal measure. Park sat at the head of the table, looking like a disappointed grandfather forced to discipline a wayward child. Junwoo sat at the opposite end, expression carved from stone. "Ms. St. Clair," Park began, voice heavy with regret. "Thank you for joining us despite what must be a difficult day. I want to assure you that this board believes in due process and fair evaluation. However, given the morning's revelations, we have concerns about the integrity of your investigation." "I understand," Imani said calmly, taking a seat at the middle of the table, neutral territory. "And I'm prepared to address those concerns with documentation." "Documentation?" One of the board members, a woman in her 50s, leaned forward. "You mean you have evidence of your innocence?" "I have evidence that someone went to extraordinary lengths to discredit me precisely when my investigation was approaching findings they wanted buried." Park's expression flickered, just slightly. "That's quite an accusation." "It's an observation supported by chronology. I request permission to present my findings to date. The board can then decide whether to continue or terminate my investigation." Murmurs around the table. The General Counsel spoke up. "Councillor Park has recommended we terminate immediately and engage a firm with no prior contact." "I object," Junwoo said. His voice cut through the room like steel. "Ms. St. Clair's contract specifies that termination before completion requires evidence of actual malfeasance, not merely public relations concerns. Unless someone can prove that her findings to date are falsified or biased, this board is legally bound to honor the contract." "The photos," Park began, "prove nothing except that 2 people sat in the same public space before knowing each other's professional relationship. Unless you have evidence of communication about confidential matters, you have an unfortunate coincidence being weaponized by whoever leaked those photos." Junwoo looked directly at Park. "Which raises the question, who had access to security footage from Incheon Airport? Who has connections deep enough to obtain surveillance from a secured VIP lounge?" The room went silent. "Are you suggesting," Park said slowly, "that I orchestrated this leak?" "I'm suggesting that someone with significant resources wanted this investigation stopped. And the timing is suspiciously convenient, given that Ms. St. Clair was scheduled to brief the board on preliminary findings this week." "Then let her brief," the female board member said. "If her findings are biased by personal connection, We'll see it in the evidence. If they're legitimate, we need to know what she discovered regardless of optics. Park looked trapped. Very well. Ms. St. Clair, present your preliminary findings. The board will evaluate both content and potential bias. Imani connected her laptop to the room's display system. Took a breath. This was it. Career-defining moment one way or another. 3 weeks ago, I was hired to audit Hanseong's financial health with particular focus on construction subsidiaries and offshore dealings. What I found was a pattern of transfers to a shell consulting company over a 15-year period. She brought up the first slide, the offshore firm's registration. This company was created 6 months before Chairman Kang's death using a Singapore law firm that had previously represented Hanseong. The registered agent is a lawyer who has never worked directly with Hanseong, but has extensive history with Councillor Park's personal legal matters. Park's expression remained neutral, but his hands tightened on the armrests. The pattern of transfers was small for the first 12 years, amounts that could be justified as legitimate consulting fees. However, during the 3-month transition period between Chairman Kang's death and CEO Kang assuming full authority, 7 construction projects show final payments 30 to 40% above contracted amounts, all routed through this shell company. Total, $17 million in 90 days. Silence. Who authorized these payments? The CFO asked. According to documentation, they were authorized using Chairman Kang's approved contract templates, but these payments occurred after his death. The signatory authority during that transition period belonged to... She paused, met Park's eyes. The interim CEO, Councillor Park Tae-jin. Explosion. Half the board started shouting. The other half sat in stunned silence. Park stood, face flushed. This is outrageous. You're accusing me of embezzlement based on paperwork filed during a chaotic transition period? I was trying to honor the chairman's final wishes. Then you can explain, Imani said calmly, why the consulting company's bank statements show transfers from their accounts to a personal holdings company registered in your wife's maiden name. She clicked to the next slide. Bank records. Clear trail. 17 million flowing from Hanseong through the offshore shell to an account that traced directly back to Park's family. The room went silent as a grave. Da-eun entered then, moving quickly to Junwoo's side. She handed him a folder, the parallel files. He opened it, scanned the contents, and his expression shifted from shock to cold fury. I have supporting documentation, he said, voice dangerously quiet. Copies of every irregular filing from the past 3 years. Courtesy of someone who noticed discrepancies and documented them privately because she didn't know who to trust. He looked at Park. Someone who's been protecting the integrity of this company while you've been robbing it. Park's lawyer stood. My client denies all accusations. This so-called evidence is clearly fabricated by an investigator whose credibility is already compromised. Then explain, Imani interrupted, pulling up another slide. Why GPS data from your personal vehicle shows you at the Singapore law firm's Seoul office 2 weeks before my investigation began. The same day, someone accessed archived security footage from Incheon Airport through a private security request filed under a shell company name, the same shell company used for the offshore accounts. She'd worked backward from the leak, tracked the surveillance request, found the company name, traced it to the same web of offshore entities Park had been using for years. You knew I was coming, she continued. You knew I'd find the construction subsidiary discrepancies. So you accessed footage from weeks earlier, hoping to find something, anything, you could use as leverage. And you got lucky. The CEO and I happened to have a random airport encounter that you could spin into scandal. This is speculation. It's documented fact. Every access request leaves a digital trail. Every security footage retrieval is logged, and every single log points back to companies you control. She pulled up the final slide, a network diagram showing Park at the center of 7 shell companies, all interconnected, all moving money in circles designed to hide the source and destination. You've been embezzling from Hanseong for at least 15 years. You escalated during the transition. And when you realized the new CEO was too ethical to ignore irregularities, you tried to blackmail the investigator into silence. The general counsel was rapidly taking notes. The female board member looked like she wanted to be sick. Minho sat frozen, staring at Park like a stranger. Junwoo stood. "Counselor Park, you're suspended from all board duties effective immediately, pending formal investigation by law enforcement. Security will escort you from the building." "You can't do this," Park said, but his voice had lost its power. "I have allies on this board. I have 30 years of... You have 30 years of betraying my father's trust and stealing from the company he built." Junwoo's voice was ice and fire. "Security. Now." 2 guards moved forward. Park looked around the table, seeking support. Found none. Everyone was either staring at the evidence on screen or looking away in shame for not seeing it sooner. As Park was escorted out, he stopped beside Imani. "You've made an enemy today. This isn't over." "Yes," she said quietly. "It is." After he left, the room exploded into overlapping conversations. The general counsel was on the phone with external prosecutors. The CFO was pulling up financial systems to trace every cent. Board members were demanding explanations, accountability, crisis plans. Imani gathered her laptop, feeling the weight of 3 weeks crash over her like a wave. She'd done it, found the truth, exposed the corruption, protected the innocent, and lost her reputation in the process. The morning's headlines weren't going away. The photos would circulate for months. Her professional credibility was permanently marked by this case, regardless of outcome. She left the boardroom quietly, slipping out while everyone was focused on damage control. In the hallway, the morning's news coverage played on a wall-mounted screen, her face beside Junwoo's, speculation about their relationship, experts questioning her ethics. "Ms. Sinclair." She turned. Minho approached, expression uncertain. "I owe you an apology," he said, "for doubting you, for not seeing what Park was doing. He was my father's friend, my Hyung's advisor. I trusted him completely. So did a lot of people. That's how people like Park operate. The construction subsidiary, that's my responsibility. I signed off on those contracts without reviewing them closely enough. If I'd been more careful, Park was a professional. He would have found another method." She softened her voice. "You're not responsible for trusting someone your family trusted. But I am responsible for not being thorough, for wanting to prove myself so badly that I didn't notice I was being used." He paused. "My brother is lucky to have found someone who fights like you do. I'm just doing my job." "No." Minho shook his head. "You burned your own reputation to expose the truth when you could have walked away quietly. That's not just a job. That's..." He searched for words. "That's the kind of integrity my father valued. The kind my brother has been trying so hard to embody. Thank you for protecting him when he couldn't protect himself." He bowed, formal, respectful, and walked away. Imani stood alone in the hallway, watching Seoul through floor-to-ceiling windows. She'd won the battle, but the war was just beginning. Because now came the hardest part, continuing to work alongside Junwoo while the world speculated about their relationship, while her every finding would be scrutinized for bias, while the line between professional collaboration and personal connection grew increasingly difficult to maintain. Her phone buzzed. Message from an unknown number. Rooftop. "Please. JW." She shouldn't go. Every instinct of professional preservation screamed against it. But she'd already burned. Might as well see what rose from the ashes. The rooftop was technically off-limits, accessible only via executive keycard. She used Da-eun's borrowed pass, stepped out into Seoul's mid-morning air. The city spread below like a promise and a threat in equal measure. Junwoo stood at the railing, still in his suit, but with jacket discarded, tie loosened, the armor of CEO ship partially dismantled. He didn't turn when she approached. "I should have seen it," he said quietly. Park was my father's closest friend. He was at every family dinner, every birthday, every milestone. He taught me how to read financial statements when I was 16, and all that time, he was stealing. He was good at hiding it. He was good at exploiting trust. Junwoo finally turned. His eyes were red-rimmed. My father died suddenly. Heart attack at his desk, late night, alone. The official story was stress from work. But what if it wasn't? What if he found out what Park was doing? What if the shock— "Don't," Imani said firmly. "Don't create narratives without evidence. That's conspiracy, not investigation." But it's possible. Many things are possible. We work with what's provable. She joined him at the railing, keeping careful distance between them. You did the right thing. In that boardroom. Most CEOs would have found a way to bury it quietly, protect the company's reputation at the cost of truth. Most CEOs didn't meet an investigator at dawn who reminded them what integrity costs. They stood in silence, two people who'd met by accident and changed each other's trajectories in ways neither had anticipated. "Your reputation is damaged," he said. "Because of me. Because I couldn't keep my personal life and professional life separate enough. We had one conversation in an airport lounge. That's not a personal life." "Wasn't it, though?" He looked at her directly. "I told you things I haven't told anyone. About fear, about impossible choices, about being terrified of being wrong. That was personal. It was human. There's a difference." "Is there?" His voice dropped. "Because I think about that conversation constantly. I think about how you asked if I was running from someone or myself, and how that question has defined every decision I've made since. I think about sitting next to a stranger who somehow saw through everything I was carrying and didn't flinch. And then I walked into that boardroom and it was you. And He stopped. "Don't," Imani said, but her voice shook slightly. "Don't say things that make this more complicated than it already is. It's already complicated. Pretending it's not doesn't change that." "No, but maintaining professional boundaries means we can both survive this without losing everything. I think I'd rather lose everything than pretend I don't feel." He cut himself off, took a breath. "I'm sorry. You're right. This isn't fair to you. Your career is in crisis. The last thing you need is the subject of your investigation making emotional confessions on a rooftop." "Thank you," she said quietly, "for understanding that. But when this is over, when the investigation is complete, and the report is filed and you're no longer professionally bound to objectivity, will you let me take you to dinner? Just dinner. As two people who met by accident and maybe want to see if that accident was the universe being kind for once." Imani closed her eyes, felt the weight of every professional rule she'd ever followed warring with the truth she'd been avoiding. She felt something for this man. Something that started with respect and deepened with every conversation, every shared moment of vulnerability, every time he chose integrity over comfort. "Ask me again," she said. "When this is finished. When there's no conflict of interest. When I'm just Imani and you're just Junwoo and neither of us is defined by titles or investigations or family legacies. Ask me then, and I'll answer honestly. That's not a no. It's not a yes either. It's a recognition that timing matters, and right now, our timing is terrible." He laughed. Soft. Sad. Understanding. The worst. They stood together as Seoul moved below them. Two people suspended between what was and what might be. Connected by truth and timing, and the most inconvenient coincidence either had ever experienced. "I should go," she said finally. "Complete the investigation. Document everything for the final report. 3 more weeks of work. 3 more weeks of pretending we're just CEO and investigator. Yes. And then? Then we'll see what survives the fire we both just walked through." She left him on that rooftop, heart hammering, professional walls intact, but showing cracks that scared her more than any threat Park had made. Because Counselor Park she could handle, embezzlement she could expose. But this, whatever this was growing between her and Junwoo, was the kind of complication that didn't follow rules or evidence or careful documentation. It was human, messy, dangerous in ways no investigation ever was, and she was terrified that it might be worth the risk. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of legal briefings, media statements, and investigative deep dives that made Imani's previous work look superficial. Park's arrest made international headlines. Korean prosecutors moved fast, too many eyes watching, too much political pressure for this to be swept under expensive carpets. They seized his assets, froze his accounts, and began the methodical process of tracing every dollar that had flowed through his network of shell companies. But Imani's work wasn't done. Park was the visible rot. She needed to find out how deep the infection went. She worked from her glass office 18 hours a day, surviving on convenience store kimbap and coffee that tasted like gasoline. Yara called twice daily with updates on the media circus and increasingly worried observations about Imani's mental state. "You're doing the thing again," Yara said on day 3. "The thing where you work yourself into the ground because if you stop moving, you have to feel things. I'm just being thorough. You're being avoidant. There's a difference." A pause. "Have you talked to him? Since the rooftop?" "He's the subject of my investigation. I talked to him professionally as needed." "That's not what I asked." Imani rubbed her eyes. Numbers swam on her screen. Bank transfers, construction invoices, contractor payments that should have been straightforward but kept hitting odd patterns. "I don't have time for personal conversations. I have 3 weeks to finish this report, and every finding will be scrutinized by people looking for evidence of bias. I can't afford distractions." "Is that what he is now? A distraction?" "Yara, I'm just saying, babe, you're allowed to be human. You're allowed to admit that you feel something for someone even when the timing is terrible. Denying it doesn't make it less true. It just makes you more exhausted." After they hung up, Imani stared at her reflection in the dark window. When had she last slept more than 4 hours? When had she last eaten a real meal? When had she last allowed herself to think about anything other than numbers and evidence and the careful construction of unimpeachable documentation? Her phone buzzed. Da-eun. CEO Kang requests your presence in conference room B. Time-sensitive matter regarding your investigation. Formal language, official channel, nothing personal about it. She gathered her laptop and files, tried to ignore the way her heart rate picked up. Conference room B was smaller than the main boardroom, designed for sensitive discussions rather than full board presentations. Junwoo sat alone at the glass table, surrounded by documents. He looked as exhausted as she felt. Shadows under his eyes, hair less perfectly styled, the careful armor of CEO-ship showing stress fractures. He stood when she entered. "Thank you for coming. I've been going through my father's personal files, the ones he kept at home rather than the office. I found something. I don't know what it means, but I thought you should see it." He pushed a leather journal across the table. Old, worn, the kind of physical record that belonged to a generation that didn't trust digital everything. Imani opened it carefully. Chairman Kang's handwriting, dated entries going back 20 years. Not quite a diary, more like abbreviated notes. Meeting records, decision logs, observations about business dealings. "Page 87, Junwoo said quietly. She flipped to it. An entry from 4 years ago, 3 months before the chairman's death. PTJ recommended the Singapore arrangement, said it would protect family assets during succession transition. Legally sound, he assured. But something feels wrong. The offshore structure is too complex for simple asset protection. Asked for documentation. He said he'd provide after the new year. Must follow up. Imani's blood went cold. Your father suspected something. 3 months before he died. Look at the next entry. She turned the page. 2 months before the chairman's death. PTJ still hasn't provided documentation. When I press, he says it's being prepared by Singapore lawyers. Takes time. Told him I want the offshore accounts closed if he can't explain them satisfactorily. He seemed worried, angry, hard to read. He's been my brother in everything but blood for 30 years. Why do I suddenly feel like I'm talking to a stranger? The final entry, dated 1 week before Chairman Kang died, was only 3 lines. Hired private auditor to review Singapore arrangements. PTJ doesn't know. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize to an old friend. If I'm right, I've been protecting a thief for decades. Report expected in 2 weeks. Imani looked up. Your father hired an auditor. Did you ever see a report? No. I didn't know about any of this until I found the journal yesterday. I've been searching through his files, his emails, everything. There's no trace of any auditor report. What happened to the auditor? That's what I need you to find out. My father died 7 days after this entry. Heart attack. Alone in his home office late at night. The autopsy said natural causes. Acute myocardial infarction brought on by stress and pre-existing hypertension. But now... Junwoo's voice cracked slightly. What if it wasn't natural? What if Park found out about the audit? That's a serious accusation. I know. Which is why I need evidence, not speculation. Can you trace the auditor? Find out what happened to their report? Imani photographed the journal entries with her phone. I'll need access to your father's personal financial records, bank statements, credit cards, phone records from that period. Everything you can get me without raising flags. Already compiled. He handed her a USB drive. I spent the last 2 nights pulling everything. It's all there. She pocketed the drive, started to leave. His voice stopped her. Imani. The use of her first name hit differently in the empty conference room. Intimate, vulnerable, a departure from the careful professional distance they'd been maintaining. She turned. If Park killed my father. He struggled with the words. If he committed murder to cover up embezzlement, and I've been honoring his counsel for 3 years, working beside him, trusting him with family matters, then you were a victim of an extremely sophisticated manipulator who spent decades building trust specifically so no one would question him. She moved closer. Junwoo, you can't blame yourself for not seeing what a professional criminal worked very hard to hide. But I should have. I'm the CEO. Protecting this company, this legacy, that's my responsibility. And you're doing it now. You handed me the evidence that exposed him. You supported the investigation even when it cost you personally. You chose truth over comfort. She stopped herself from reaching out to touch his arm. That's what leaders do. Not predict every possible betrayal, but respond with integrity when betrayal is revealed. He looked at her with something raw in his expression. Gratitude mixed with grief, mixed with something else she couldn't name and didn't dare examine too closely. Thank you, he said, for being thorough, for not stopping when it got complicated, he paused, for seeing me that morning in the airport and not running when you found out who I was. I told you, I don't run. No, you confront. Even when it's terrifying. Even when it costs you. His voice dropped. I wish we'd met differently. Under circumstances that didn't make everything between us so impossible. We met exactly when we were supposed to, she heard herself say. At 4:30 in the morning when we both needed someone to be honest with. The rest, the complications, the investigation, the timing, that's just the universe testing whether we meant what we said in that lounge. And did we? I don't know yet. Ask me again when I finish the investigation. A faint smile. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. She moved toward the door, paused. Junwoo, your father sounds like he was a good man who made one mistake, trusting the wrong person. Don't let discovering that mistake erase 30 years of honorable work. Whatever I find in these records, remember that. After she left, Junwoo sat alone with his father's journal, running his fingers over handwriting that had signed his childhood birthday cards, approved his college applications, welcomed him into the company with pride and expectations in equal measure. If Park had murdered his father, no legal punishment would be enough. But proving it, that required evidence, not grief. And Imani was the only person he trusted to find that evidence without agenda, without bias, with nothing but the relentless commitment to truth that had defined her from the moment she sat down next to him and asked why he was running. He pulled out his phone, typed a message he knew he shouldn't send, stared at it for 5 minutes, sent it anyway. "I'm scared of what you're going to find, but I'm more scared of not knowing. Thank you for not protecting me from the truth." In her office 3 floors down, Imani's phone buzzed. She read the message twice, typed and deleted 3 different responses, finally settled on, "Truth is the only foundation strong enough to build anything lasting. Whatever we find, we'll face it together." Professionally, with integrity, she hit send before she could overthink it, then added, "And for what it's worth, you're stronger than you think. Your father knew that. That's why he chose you." The reply came immediately. "How do you know?" She typed, "Because he wrote it in his journal. Page 23. First entry after you graduated university." A pause. Then, "You read the whole thing?" "I'm thorough. It's my flaw and my profession." She could almost feel his smile through the phone. The dangerous intimacy of late-night messages, the blurring of professional lines, the slow slide toward something neither of them could take back. She put her phone face down on her desk, opened the USB drive of the chairman's personal records, started the methodical work of tracing an auditor who'd been hired in secret and disappeared without delivering a report. 3 hours later, she found it. A wire transfer from Chairman Kang's personal account 4 years ago. $50,000 to a firm called Meridian Financial Analysis. The memo line, confidential audit, Singapore Holdings. She searched the firm. Found a website that was still live but hadn't been updated in 3 years. A small operation, 3 auditors, specialized in offshore asset verification and forensic accounting. She called the listed number. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. The message was generic, automated, unhelpful. She tried the individual auditors' names, found LinkedIn profiles for 2 of them. Both had moved to different firms 3 years ago. The third name, the one listed as lead auditor for the chairman's case, had no digital footprint after his LinkedIn went dormant 4 years ago. His name was David Chen. Last known position, senior auditor, Meridian Financial Analysis. Last LinkedIn activity, 4 years and 2 months ago. Exactly when he would have been working on Chairman Kang's case. Imani felt the cold certainty of pattern recognition. One man dies of sudden heart attack. Another disappears from all professional channels. Both connected to an investigation of Park Tae-jin's offshore network. She pulled up death records for Seoul. Searched David Chen's name with various date ranges. Found it. Chen, David Sung-min. Age 41. Cause of death, traffic accident. Single vehicle collision with highway barrier, late night, driver fatality. Date, 4 years ago, 2 days after Chairman Kang's death. The autopsy report was public record. She downloaded it. Read through medical terminology that boiled down to driver lost control at high speed, no evidence of mechanical failure, toxicology clean, ruled accidental death. But the timing. 2 days after the chairman's heart attack, before the audit report could be delivered. She pulled up the accident report. Location, highway near Incheon, late night, no witnesses. Chen had been driving alone, returning from what the police report noted as business meeting in the city. Meeting with whom? About what? She searched for any communication between Chen and Chairman Kang, found nothing in the chairman's email. But in his phone records, there, 3 calls to Chen's number in the week before the chairman's death. The last one, 6 hours before the chairman's heart attack. They'd spoken. About what? The records couldn't say. But 6 hours later, the chairman was dead. 2 days after that, the auditor was dead. And Park Tae-jin was suddenly the interim CEO with 3 months of unsupervised access to every financial system in the company. Imani's hands shook as she documented everything. This wasn't embezzlement anymore. This was murder, potentially double murder, and she was holding evidence that could either prove it or get her killed for trying. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then professional instinct overrode caution. Ms. St. Clair. The voice was distorted, electronically modified. You're looking into matters that ended 4 years ago. Let them stay ended. The chairman's death was investigated and closed. The auditor's accident was tragic but unrelated. Park Tae-jin is already arrested for embezzlement. Take your win and finish your report. Don't dig deeper. Who is this? Someone with your best interests in mind. You've already damaged your reputation. Don't damage your health. The line went dead. Imani sat in her glass office, surrounded by Seoul's nightlights, holding evidence of possible double murder and receiving threats from voices that knew exactly what she was investigating. She should back off. Report what she had to prosecutors and let them handle it. She'd done her job. Exposed the embezzlement, provided evidence, protected the company. But the pharmaceutical CEO's daughter's words echoed. You cared more about your reputation than people's lives. What if she'd dug deeper on that case? What if she'd followed the threads that felt wrong instead of stopping at the documented fraud? Would that CEO still be alive if she'd been more thorough, less afraid of exceeding her mandate? She couldn't rewrite that history. But she could choose differently this time. She called Junwoo. He answered on the first ring. I found the auditor, she said. And I think Park killed him and your father. Silence. Then, tell me everything. She did. Every detail, every connection, every piece of evidence that individually looked circumstantial, but collectively painted a picture of carefully orchestrated murder, disguised as natural causes and tragic accident. When she finished, Junwoo's voice was hollow. What do? We prove it. Or we admit we can't and let the embezzlement conviction be enough. She paused. But I need you to understand, if we pursue this, we're putting targets on our backs. Someone just called me with a threat. They know I'm looking into the deaths. They know exactly what I've found. That means someone connected to Park is watching us. Or Park himself is making calls from custody. Either way, this gets dangerous. And I won't blame you if you want me to stop here. You've already lost enough. No. His voice hardened. If Park killed my father, if he murdered a man who trusted him for 30 years, then he doesn't get to escape with just embezzlement charges. He doesn't get to retire comfortably in a white-collar prison while my father is in the ground. Junwoo, prove it, Imani. Find the evidence, whatever it takes, and I'll make sure you're protected while you do it. You can't promise that. I can promise I'll try. His voice softened. You asked me once what the right choice was. I told you it was the one that saves who I am. This is that choice. Find the truth, no matter what it costs. After they hung up, Imani sat in the darkness of her office and made a choice that would either define her career or end it. She was going after Park for murder, and whatever came next, she'd face it the same way she'd faced everything since that dawn in the airport lounge, with truth as her compass and integrity as her armor, even when both felt like insufficient protection against people who'd already killed twice. Her phone buzzed. Message from Yara. I saw the news about Park's arrest. Please tell me you're being careful. Imani typed, define careful. Not dead, not arrested, not making choices that traumatize me when I have to identify your body. Despite everything, Imani smiled. I promise to stay not dead. Other two are negotiable. That's not funny. Wasn't meant to be. Love you. Talk tomorrow. She turned back to her screens. Started building the case that would either bring justice for a murdered chairman and auditor, or prove that sometimes coincidences were just coincidences, and grief made people see conspiracies where there was only tragedy. But deep in her gut, the same gut that had never led her wrong in 12 investigations, she knew Park had killed them both, and she was going to prove it, even if it killed her trying. By day 6 of the murder investigation, Imani had assembled enough circumstantial evidence to make prosecutors very interested and defense lawyers very nervous. The problem: circumstantial evidence didn't convict. She needed the smoking gun. The document, the communication, the piece of physical proof that transformed a compelling theory into an undeniable fact. She found it in the last place anyone would think to look: Chairman Kang's home security system. Modern Korean homes, especially those belonging to wealthy executives, had comprehensive security. Cameras, motion sensors, digital logs of every entry and exit. Chairman Kang had been security conscious after a kidnapping threat against Minho 15 years earlier. His home system archived everything for 2 years before automatic deletion. But 4 years ago, technology was advancing. Cloud backup was becoming standard. And the chairman's security company had offered an upgrade: permanent cloud storage for a nominal fee. Imani found the contract in his personal files. He'd agreed to the upgrade 6 months before his death, which meant somewhere in a cloud server, footage still existed from the night Chairman Kang died. She called the security company, navigated through customer service layers until she reached someone with actual authority, explained that she was investigating on behalf of the Kang family, provided authorization documents signed by Junwoo, requested access to archived footage from the night of the chairman's death. The manager hesitated. That footage is over 4 years old. We typically don't maintain access that far back unless there's ongoing investigation. Was there an ongoing investigation? Let me check. Keyboard sounds. A long pause. Actually, yes. There's a flag on this account. Someone requested access to this specific footage 4 years ago, shortly after the chairman's death. The request was approved by... More keyboard sounds. Counselor Park Tae-jin, acting on behalf of the family during the transition period. Imani's pulse jumped. Did the request specify what footage they wanted? Yes. The 36 hours surrounding the chairman's death. The request memo says it was for insurance purposes and closure for the family. And was the footage provided? Yes. Downloaded by Counselor Park's assistant using authorized credentials. No copies made since then according to our logs. But the original still exists on your servers? It should. Let me verify. A longer pause. Then, that's strange. The file directory shows it should be there, but when I try to access it, I'm getting an error. File corrupted or missing. Of course it was. Park had viewed the footage, then made sure no one else could. Can corrupted files be recovered? Sometimes. Depends on what caused the corruption. If it was accidental degradation, we might be able to restore from backup. If it was deliberately deleted or overwritten. He trailed off meaningfully. How long would recovery take? A few days, maybe a week. We'd need to engage our IT forensics team. Do it. Bill it to the Kang family account. And please flag this request as confidential. Don't notify any other authorized users that recovery is in progress. Ms. St. Clair, I should mention that Counselor Park is still listed as an authorized account manager. Protocol requires we notify him of any access requests. Counselor Park is currently under arrest for embezzling from the Kang family. He no longer has authorization for anything. But if you notify him, you'll be alerting a suspect that evidence is being recovered. Is that really a protocol you want to follow? A thoughtful pause. I'll flag this as a system maintenance issue rather than an access request. That won't trigger notifications. But Ms. St. Clair, whatever you're looking for on that footage, it must be significant if someone went to the trouble of corrupting it. That's what I'm counting on. She spent the next 3 days building parallel cases. The embezzlement evidence she could prove beyond doubt, and the murder theory she could support with circumstantial evidence but not yet confirm. The embezzlement case was solid enough to present to the board for the preliminary report. The murder case needed more time, but time was running out. Her 6-week contract was approaching its end, and the board was pressuring for final conclusions. On day 8, she received a call from Junwoo. His voice was tight. We need to talk. Privately. Not the office. Where? My apartment. I'm sending you the address. Come now. Warning bells rang, but she went anyway. His apartment was in Gangnam, a modern high-rise with security that scanned her identification 3 times before allowing elevator access. The penthouse, of course it was the penthouse, had floor-to-ceiling windows showing Seoul at dusk, minimalist furniture that looked expensive because it was, and a kitchen that had probably never been used for actual cooking. Junwoo answered the door in jeans and a t-shirt, the first time she'd seen him in anything other than suits. He looked younger, more vulnerable, like the man from the airport lounge instead of the CEO from the boardroom. "What happened?" she asked. He handed her his phone. On screen, a text message from an unknown number. "Your investigator is pursuing theories beyond her mandate. Chairman Kang died of natural causes confirmed by autopsy. Continuing this line of investigation will result in consequences for everyone involved. This is your only warning." "When did you get this?" 20 minutes ago. "Right after I submitted a formal request to the police to reopen my father's death investigation based on new evidence." He met her eyes. "Someone is monitoring official channels." They knew within minutes. "That means someone inside the police or prosecutor's office is feeding information to Park's network. Or Park has allies we haven't identified yet." Junwoo moved to the window. "Imani, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Is pursuing the murder investigation worth the risk? You've already given us enough evidence to ensure Park spends years in prison for embezzlement. If we stop here, we win. The company is protected, the corruption is exposed, justice is served. Why risk everything, including your life, to prove he killed my father when we already have him on other charges?" She joined him at the window. "Because your father deserves justice for what actually happened to him, not just the crimes that are easier to prove. Because David Chen's family deserves to know their son wasn't killed in a random traffic accident. And because if we let Park get away with murder, we're saying that some crimes are acceptable as long as you commit enough of them that pursuing all of them becomes inconvenient. That's very principled. It's also dangerous. I've been threatened before. I've survived. This feels different." His voice was low. "The pharmaceutical CEO, you said he made his own choice. But what if someone made that choice for him? What if the suicide wasn't suicide? Have you ever considered that?" The question hit like a physical blow. She'd asked herself the same thing 100 times in the year since that case, always pushing the thought away because investigating it meant admitting she might have missed murder while focused on fraud. "I can't rewrite that case," she said quietly. "But I can choose differently this time. I can be thorough instead of stopping at the convenient conclusion. Even if being thorough gets you killed? Would you respect me if I chose safety over truth?" He turned to face her. They were standing closer than professional distance, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear beneath the CEO exterior, the weight of carrying an empire built on his murdered father's legacy. "I'd respect you for being human enough to admit when the cost is too high." "The cost is always too high," she said. "That's what makes it worth paying." They stood in that moment, suspended between the choice to continue and the wisdom to stop, connected by a case that kept forcing them together, even as every professional instinct said, "Maintain distance." "Imani," his voice was barely above a whisper. "When this is over, when there's no investigation, no conflict of interest, no professional obligations keeping us apart, I'm going to ask you that question I asked on the rooftop, about dinner, about seeing if what we felt at 4:30 in an airport lounge translates to real life. And I need you to know that I'm asking not because you're helping me expose corruption or because I'm grateful for your work. I'm asking because when I look at you, I see someone who makes me want to be the version of myself that my father would be proud of, the version that chooses integrity, even when it costs everything." Her breath caught. "Junwoo, you don't have to answer now. You don't have to answer ever if you don't want to. I just needed you to know that whatever happens next, whether we prove the murder or walk away, whether we both survive this or one of us doesn't, meeting you was the most important coincidence of my life." Before she could respond, her phone rang. The security company. "Ms. St. Clair, we recovered the footage. You need to see this. Now." 20 minutes later, They were both crowded around her laptop in Junwoo's living room, watching security footage from 4 years ago. The timestamp: night of Chairman Kang's death, 8 p.m. The angle: Chairman's home office, wide shot showing desk, door, and window. Chairman Kang sat at his desk, working on his computer. Chairman Kang sat at his desk, working on his computer. He looked tired, but not unwell. Healthy enough for someone in his 60s with a high-stress job. At 8:47 p.m., the office door opened. Park Tae-jin entered. Imani and Junwoo exchanged glances. They couldn't hear audio. The archive only included video, but they could see the conversation. Chairman Kang gestured for Park to sit. Park remained standing. The body language was tense. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. At 8:51, Park set something on the desk. A folder. Chairman Kang opened it, read the contents. His expression shifted from professional attention to confusion to something that looked like betrayal. He stood, pointed to the door. Clear message: leave. Park didn't move. He spoke. They could see his lips moving, and whatever he said made Chairman Kang reach for his phone. Park moved fast, crossed the distance between them in 3 steps, grabbed the phone. They struggled, brief, awkward, 2 old friends who'd never expected to physically fight. Chairman Kang stumbled back. His hand went to his chest, his face contorted in pain. Park froze, watched for 5 seconds that felt eternal, then moved again, but not to help. He picked up the folder he'd brought, took the chairman's phone, and left the room. Chairman Kang collapsed against his desk, tried to reach for something, the desk phone maybe, or emergency alert button. Couldn't make it, slid to the floor. The timestamp: 8:56 p.m. According to official records, the chairman's death was discovered at 11:30 p.m. when Minho stopped by to drop off documents and found his father on the office floor. The medical examiner estimated time of death between 9 mag and 10 gal p.m. Park had left Chairman Kang dying and didn't call for help. Worse, he'd taken evidence and the phone, ensuring no one could respond until it was too late. He killed him. Junwoo's voice was hollow. He brought documents that triggered a heart attack, then watched him die and stole evidence. What was in the folder? Imani paused the footage, zoomed in on the moment Park set it down. Couldn't make out details, but could see it was thick, multiple pages. The audit report, Junwoo said. It has to be. David Chen completed the audit, gave it to my father, and my father confronted Park. Park realized he was caught. He could have called an ambulance. He could have tried to help. Instead, he took the evidence and let my father die alone. Imani was already on her phone. I'm calling the prosecutors. This is the smoking gun. Video evidence of Park allowing a man to die while stealing documents and phones that would have summoned help. This is criminally negligent homicide at minimum, possibly premeditated murder if we can prove he triggered the heart attack deliberately. What about Chen, the auditor? If Park knew Chen had delivered the report to the chairman, he knew Chen could recreate it. 2 days later, Chen dies in a suspicious traffic accident. That goes from coincidence to pattern. She spent the next hour on the phone with prosecutors, walking them through the evidence, providing access to the recovered footage, connecting dots between the embezzlement, the deaths, and Park's systematic cover-up. When she finally hung up, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She'd been running on adrenaline and coffee for 8 days. Her career was in tatters. Her reputation was compromised. But she'd done what she came to do: found truth, exposed corruption, delivered justice. She looked up to find Junwoo watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What? You're extraordinary," he said quietly. "You know that? Most people would have stopped at the embezzlement, taken the win, protected themselves. But you kept digging until you found the real crime, until you gave my father justice. I was just thorough. No, you were brave. There's a difference." He moved closer, careful to maintain professional distance, but close enough that she felt the weight of everything unspoken between them. "Thank you for not giving up, for not protecting me from the truth, for being exactly what you said you were in that airport lounge, someone who confronts instead of runs. What happens now? She asked. Now the prosecutors take over. They'll upgrade the charges against Park: embezzlement plus criminally negligent homicide, evidence tampering, possibly conspiracy to commit murder regarding Chen's death. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Junwoo's voice was steady, but his eyes were grieving. My father's legacy will be complicated. People will know he was murdered while trying to stop corruption, but they'll also know his closest friend betrayed him for 15 years before that. It's not the clean story I wanted. Our truth rarely is. No, but it's real, and real is what I needed. He sat down heavily on the couch. Min-ho is taking it hard. He loved Park like an uncle. Finding out someone you trusted was capable of murder, that breaks something in you. Imani sat beside him, maintaining that careful distance. How are you handling it? I don't know yet. Ask me in a few months when the shock wears off. He turned to look at her. How are you handling it? Your reputation is still damaged. The airport photos are still circulating. The pharmaceutical CEO's family is still questioning your ethics. You exposed massive corruption and solved a murder, but the public narrative is still about conflict of interest. The truth takes time to settle. Eventually, the evidence speaks louder than the scandal. I've seen it before. She hoped she sounded more confident than she felt. And if it doesn't? If your career never fully recovers? She thought about that. Then I'll know I chose integrity over reputation. I can live with that. I've lived with worse. They sat in silence as Seoul's lights flickered on below them. Two people who'd met by impossible coincidence and been forged together by crisis. 3 more weeks, Junwoo said finally, to complete the official investigation report, to document everything for the board. And then the contract ends. You're just the CEO. I'm just the investigator who finished her job. No more professional obligations. No more excuses to avoid the question of what we are to each other. She smiled despite everything. Is that what we've been doing? Avoiding? Haven't we? Maybe. Or maybe we've been building something strong enough to survive outside the crisis that created it. She stood. I should go. It's late, and we both need sleep that isn't interrupted by evidence and death. He walked her to the door. Imani. She paused. That question I keep saying I'll ask. About dinner, about seeing if this is real outside the investigation. I know I said I'd wait until everything was finished, but I need to ask now, not for an answer, just to put it out there so you know it's coming. Okay. When this is over, when you're no longer bound by professional ethics, and I'm no longer the subject of your investigation, will you let me take you to dinner? As two people who met at 4:30 in the morning and maybe found something neither of us was looking for. The question hung in the air between them, dangerous and hopeful in equal measure. Ask me again, she said softly. In 3 weeks, when the report is filed and the contract is complete. Ask me then, and I'll answer honestly. Is the answer going to be yes? Ask me in 3 weeks. But she smiled when she said it, and he saw the answer in her eyes even if she wouldn't speak it yet. The final 3 weeks of the investigation should have been straightforward. Compile documentation. Write the comprehensive report. Present findings to the board. Standard procedure for a case that was anything but standard. Imani worked 16-hour days, turning evidence into narrative, ensuring every claim was supported by irrefutable documentation. The embezzlement case was airtight. The murder case was strong enough that prosecutors had upgraded Park's charges and were building toward trial. But on day 4 of those final 3 weeks, everything shifted. She was reviewing construction subsidiary files when she noticed something she'd missed before. A pattern in the authorization signatures during the year before Chairman Kang's death. Most were Park's, as expected. But 3 contracts showed a different secondary signature. KMH Kang Min-ho. She pulled the contracts, examined them closely. They were from 2 years ago, after Junwoo had given Min-ho authority over the construction subsidiary, but before Park's arrest. The amounts were smaller than Park's usual transfers, but they followed the same pattern: offshore consulting fees that were too round, too consistent. She cross-referenced the offshore accounts, found transfers that matched the contract amounts, traced them forward. 2 of the 3 transfers had gone to the same shell companies Park used. But the third went somewhere different. A separate offshore account, registered to a company with a name that made her blood run cold. Miho Holdings. Miho. Minho's childhood nickname. She sat back, feeling sick. This couldn't be what it looked like. Minho was the younger brother, the insecure one, the man who'd apologized for not seeing Park's corruption. He couldn't be involved. But investigators didn't work on assumptions. They worked on evidence. She pulled every document with Minho's signature, started building a timeline. Most of his work was legitimate. Normal construction approvals, standard contracts. But scattered through 2 years, she found 6 transactions that followed the offshore pattern. Small amounts compared to Park's operation. Maybe 2 million total. Either Minho had been Park's accomplice, or he'd been running a smaller parallel scheme, or he'd been manipulated into signing things he didn't understand. She needed to know which before including it in her final report. Because if Minho was guilty, it would destroy Junwoo. And if he was innocent, but she accused him, it would destroy the family anyway. She called Da-eun. "I need to ask you something confidential, off the record." "Of course." 2 years ago, when Minho took over construction subsidiary authority, did Park have significant influence over his decisions? A pause. Park mentored Minho, guided him through the transition. Why? Did Minho sign documents without reviewing them if Park recommended approval? A longer pause. Sometimes, he was trying to prove he could handle the responsibility. He trusted Park's judgment because the whole family did. Da-eun's voice sharpened. "Ms. St. Clair, did you find something involving Minho?" "I found signatures that need explanation. It could be innocent. It could be manipulation. Or it could be complicity." "Yes." "What are you going to do?" "Talk to him." "Directly. Give him a chance to explain before I document anything in the official report." "That's risky. If he is guilty, you're giving him warning to prepare a defense or destroy evidence. If he's innocent, I'm giving him the courtesy of not destroying his life based on signatures he might not remember authorizing." Imani closed her laptop. "Can you arrange a meeting? Private, not at the office." "When?" "Tonight, before I second-guess this decision." They met at a quiet cafe in Hongdae, the kind of place where university students studied late into the night, and no one paid attention to business conversations in corner booths. Minho arrived looking confused and slightly nervous. Da-eun said you needed to discuss something sensitive. He slid into the booth across from her. Imani had spent 3 hours deciding how to approach this, decided on directness. "I found 6 transactions over 2 years with your authorization signature. They follow the same offshore pattern Park used for embezzlement. I need you to explain them before I include them in my final report." The color drained from Minho's face. "What transactions?" She showed him the contracts on her tablet, watched his expression shift from confusion to recognition to horror. "I remember these," he said slowly. "Park brought them to me. Said they were standard consulting fees for specialized engineering advice that the construction teams needed. He said my father had used the same consultants for years, that it was routine. Did you verify that?" "No." His voice was barely audible. "I trusted him. He was my father's friend, my Hyung's advisor. I thought..." He stopped. Took a breath. "I thought he was helping me learn the business. I signed what he recommended because I was terrified of making mistakes and proving everyone right that I wasn't capable of real responsibility." "Did you know the consulting company was a shell? That the money was going offshore?" "No. I swear I had no idea. I just signed the contracts Park put in front of me." He looked up, and his eyes were desperate. "I'm not a thief." I'm just an idiot who trusted the wrong person and was too proud to admit I didn't understand everything I was approving. Imani studied him. She'd interviewed enough guilty people to recognize the difference between calculated lies and genuine panic. Minho's terror was real. The money went into offshore accounts, she said carefully. But not all of it went where Park's funds went. One account is registered to a company called Miho Holdings, your childhood nickname. He went pale. That's not possible. I didn't create any companies. I don't have any offshore accounts. Then someone created it using your identity. The registration documents have your signature. Can I see them? She pulled them up. He stared at the signature for a long time. That's not my signature, he said finally. It's close, but look, the way the I connects to the O. I don't write it like that. Someone forged this. Imani looked closely. He was right. The signature was an excellent forgery, but under scrutiny, the differences were visible. Park had access to all your documents, she said. He could have practiced your signature. Created accounts in your name as insurance. If the embezzlement was ever discovered, he'd have a fall guy. My Hyung. Minho's voice broke. He was going to let me take the blame. He mentored me, pretended to care about my development, made me sign contracts I didn't understand. Also, he could frame me if anyone ever caught him. Or he was keeping you as an option. If the investigation had gone differently, if I'd found your signatures first, the narrative could have been, unstable younger brother embezzled funds while trusted family advisor tried to cover it up to protect the family. Minho put his head in his hands. I almost destroyed everything. If you hadn't been thorough enough to trace the actual money movement, if you'd stopped at the signatures. But I didn't. And now we know. She closed her tablet. I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Did Park ever ask you to do anything else? Sign anything else? Authorize payments or transfers that felt unusual? He thought for a long moment. There was one thing. About 6 months ago, before you were hired, Park asked me to authorize a payment to a private security firm, said it was for updating the building's surveillance systems. The amount seemed high, about $200,000, but he said it was necessary for insurance compliance. I signed the authorization. Imani's pulse jumped. Do you remember the company name? Something like Sentinel Security Solutions, maybe? She pulled up her files, searched for that name. Found it buried in a subsidiary account, authorized by Minho, paid 6 months before the airport photos were leaked. That's the company Park used to access airport surveillance footage, she said. He paid them using Hansong funds you authorized. You funded the operation that was used to blackmail both me and your brother. Minho looked like he might be sick. I helped him. Without knowing, but I helped him. You were manipulated by a professional who spent 30 years building trust specifically so no one would question him. That's not complicity. That's victimhood. Tell that to the board. Tell that to my brother. Tell that to everyone who'll see those signatures and think I was either a thief or too incompetent to notice I was being used. He stood abruptly. I need to resign. Tonight. Before the final report is issued, my presence is a liability to the company. Minho. No, you don't understand. My whole life I've been the younger brother, the one who wasn't quite good enough, wasn't quite ready, wasn't quite trustworthy with real responsibility. And now I have proof that everyone was right. I was given one significant authority, and I was so desperate to prove myself that I signed away millions without even reading the documents carefully. You were targeted by someone who was very good at exploitation. That doesn't make you incompetent. It makes you human. It makes me a failure. He pulled out his phone. I'm calling my brother. I'll resign formally. Maybe if I take responsibility publicly, it'll mitigate some of the damage to Hanseng's reputation. Or maybe, Imani said firmly, you stay. You learn from this. You become the person who knows exactly how manipulation works because you've survived it. You help build systems that prevent anyone else from being victimized the same way. He stared at her. Why would you defend me? You're supposed to be objective. If anything, reporting my involvement, even if I was manipulated, would make your investigation look more thorough. I'm defending you because the evidence supports your innocence of intent. Yes, you signed documents, but the forensics show you didn't benefit from the offshore accounts, didn't create the shell companies, and didn't knowingly participate in the scheme. You were a tool Park used. Including that context in my report is more accurate than simply noting your signatures without explaining the coercion. My brother won't see it that way. He'll see that I almost destroyed everything our father built. Your brother, Imani said, will see that you're another victim of Park's 30-year deception, and he'll either help you heal from that or he'll lose his only remaining family. Which do you think he'll choose? Minho sat back down slowly. You really believe that? I believe people deserve the full truth, not the convenient version. And the full truth is that you made mistakes, but mistakes aren't crimes when you're being deliberately deceived. Her phone buzzed. Junwoo. Minho just called me. Said he needs to confess something and resign. What happened? She typed back. Come to Cafe Rooftop in Hongdae. Now, we all need to talk. 20 minutes later, Junwoo arrived looking like he'd aged 5 years since morning. He slid into the booth beside his brother, expression carefully controlled. Tell me, he said. Minho did. Every signature, every manipulated authorization, every moment of trusting Park because he seemed like family. His voice shook, but he didn't look away. When he finished, Junwoo was silent for a long time. You should have told me you felt overwhelmed, he said finally. When I gave you the construction authority. If you weren't ready, if you needed more guidance. I wanted to prove I could handle it, Minho interrupted. I wanted you to see me as capable, as worthy of the family name. You are worthy. But part of being worthy is knowing when to ask for help before pride makes you vulnerable to people like Park. Junwoo's voice softened. I'm not angry at you for being manipulated. I'm angry at Park for targeting you. And I'm angry at myself for not seeing you were struggling. So I'm not fired? Fired? No. You're going to work with our updated compliance team to build systems that prevent anyone else from being exploited this way. You're going to use what you learned to protect this company better than anyone else could. He looked at Imani. If Ms. St. Clair agrees, that's an appropriate response given the evidence. I think, Imani said carefully, that would be an example of transforming victimhood into purpose, which is far more valuable than punishment for crimes that weren't committed. Minho's eyes filled with tears he tried to hide. Thank you, both of you, for seeing the truth even when it would have been easier to just see my signatures and assume the worst. Junwoo put his hand on his brother's shoulder. We're family. Imperfect, complicated, carrying damage from a man who spent 30 years pretending to care about us while stealing everything he could. But we're family. And we face things together. After Minho left, visibly lighter, like a weight had been removed, Junwoo and Imani sat in the cafe booth, the space between them charged with everything unspoken. 2 weeks left, he said, on your contract. 2 weeks. And then? And then I file the final report, document everything, testify at Park's trial if needed, and figure out what comes next for my career. She smiled faintly. Assuming I still have one after this case. You will. The truth always comes out eventually. People will realize you exposed massive corruption despite professional sabotage. That makes you extraordinary, not compromised. You have more faith in public memory than I do. I have faith in you. That's different. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd been forged together by crisis, and were now facing the complicated question of whether they could exist outside it. Imani? Junwoo's voice was quiet. In 2 weeks, when the contract ends, I'm still going to ask that question. About dinner. About seeing if this is real. I know. And you're still going to make me wait for an answer? I'm going to make sure the answer I give is the right one. Not the one influenced by crisis or gratitude, or the intensity of working together under threat. The real answer. I can respect that. He stood, helped her with her coat, despite the equality of the gesture feeling weighted with meaning. But I already know my answer. Have since the airport lounge. The rest is just logistics. She laughed despite herself. You reduce complicated emotions to logistics? I'm a CEO. Everything reduces to logistics eventually. But his smile was warm, genuine, the man beneath the title. See you at the office, Ms. Sinclair. 2 weeks until liberation from professional ethics. 2 weeks, she agreed. And then we'll see what survives when we're not defined by the investigation anymore. But as she walked back to her hotel through Seoul's lit streets, she knew. They'd survived the worst of each other. Crisis, scandal, murder, betrayal. If they could survive that, they could survive anything. Including the terrifying possibility of being happy together once the fire stopped burning around them. The final 2 weeks passed in a blur of documentation, legal consultations, and the painstaking work of transforming investigation into comprehensive report. Imani worked with a focus that bordered on obsessive, ensuring every claim was bulletproof, every conclusion supported by multiple sources, every recommendation backed by evidence that could withstand any challenge. The report structure emerged. Executive summary. Park Tae-jin embezzled $17 million over 15 years, escalating during Chairman Kang's final months. Evidence indicates Chairman Kang discovered the scheme and confronted Park, resulting in criminally negligent homicide. Auditor David Chen's death classified as suspicious, under prosecutor review for conspiracy to commit murder. Secondary finding. Kang Min-ho's signatures appeared on 6 compromised contracts. Forensic analysis indicates manipulation and forgery rather than willing complicity. Recommend enhanced oversight and training, not termination. Corporate governance recommendations. Complete restructuring of financial oversight. Elimination of single signatory authority for large transfers. Mandatory external audits every 2 years. Whistleblower protections for employees who notice irregularities. Family legacy. Assessment. Chairman Kang died attempting to stop corruption, not participating in it. His legacy should reflect his final act of integrity, rather than his misplaced trust in a decades-long friendship. It was the hardest report she'd ever written. Usually, investigations had clear villains and victims. This one had a villain who'd pretended to be family for 30 years, victims who'd trusted with good reason, and a tangle of guilt and innocence that didn't fit neat categories. On the second-to-last day of her contract, the board convened for the final presentation. The same conference room where she'd first exposed Park. But the atmosphere was different now. Less hostile, more grieving. These were people who'd worked with Park for decades, who'd trusted him, who were now facing the reality that they'd been complicit through ignorance. Imani presented for 90 minutes, walked them through every finding, every piece of evidence, every recommendation. When she reached the section on Min-ho, she was careful and clear. Kang Min-ho was targeted for exploitation due to his position, his insecurity, and his desire to prove himself worthy of family trust. Park Tae-jin systematically manipulated him into authorizing transactions that appeared legitimate, but fed into the embezzlement network. Forensic analysis of signatures and financial flows indicates Min-ho did not personally benefit from these transactions and was unaware of their true purpose. I recommend the board recognize him as a victim of the scheme rather than a participant. One of the older board members, a woman who'd known the chairman, spoke up. Ms. Sinclair, with all respect to your thorough work, how can we be certain Min-ho was truly unaware? Willful ignorance is sometimes indistinguishable from plausible deniability. Because I traced every dollar, Imani replied. If Min-ho had been complicit or aware, there would be financial benefit somewhere. Hidden accounts, unexplained assets, lifestyle inflation. There's none. His personal finances are remarkably clean for someone in his position. Additionally, the offshore account registered under his childhood nickname was created using forged signatures. Park was building insurance. If the scheme was discovered, He had a fall guy ready. Junwoo added, "My brother has agreed to reduced signatory authority and enhanced oversight during a probationary period. He's also volunteering to work with compliance teams to develop training that prevents others from being similarly manipulated. I believe that's a more productive response than termination based on victimization." The board voted. Minho retained his position with the agreed restrictions. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive enough. When the presentation concluded, the female board member approached Imani privately. "Ms. St. Clair, I owe you an apology. When those airport photos leaked, I assumed the worst. I thought you were another auditor who'd been compromised by personal connection. I was wrong. Your work here was exceptional despite deliberate sabotage. Thank you for being thorough when thoroughness cost you personally." "I appreciate that," Imani said. "Though I'd appreciate it more if you'd say it publicly when people question my professional ethics." The woman smiled. "I'll do better than that. I'll be writing a formal letter to your professional organization, commending your work under hostile conditions. It won't erase the scandal, but it might help rebuild what was damaged." After the board dispersed, Imani packed up her materials in the small office she'd occupied for 6 weeks. Da-un appeared in the doorway carrying a small wrapped package. "From the administrative staff," she said. "We wanted you to have something to remember that not everyone here was trying to sabotage you." Inside, a beautiful fountain pen, Korean craftsmanship, with an engraving. "Truth requires courage. Thank you for having both. Hansung staff." Imani's throat tightened unexpectedly. "Tell them thank you. This means more than they know. Will you stay in Seoul, or return to London?" "I don't know yet. My firm wants me back, but after everything that happened..." She trailed off. "I need to figure out what comes next. For my career. For everything." "For everything," Da-un repeated knowingly. "Including CEO Kang? Is it that obvious?" "Only to anyone who's watched you two try very hard to maintain professional distance while looking at each other like you're the only real things in each other's worlds." Da-un smiled. "For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. You make him want to be better than he already is. That's rare." After Da-un left, Imani sat alone in the glass office one last time, watching Seoul move below. 6 weeks ago, she'd arrived in this city expecting a routine corporate audit. Instead, she'd exposed embezzlement, solved a murder, prevented a brother from taking false blame, and met someone who made her question whether building walls around her heart had been wisdom or just fear. Her phone buzzed. Junwoo. "Rooftop. One last time before the contract officially ends. Please." She shouldn't go. The contract technically had one more day. But she'd already written the report, delivered the presentation, completed her professional obligations in every way that mattered. She went. The rooftop was the same as before. Seoul spread below like scattered stars, the city alive with possibility. But this time, Junwoo had brought something. A small table, 2 chairs, takeout containers from what smelled like the best Korean food in the city, and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "I know the contract doesn't officially end until tomorrow," he said. "But I thought we could celebrate surviving the worst 6 weeks of both our lives with something resembling actual dinner. This looks like more than something resembling dinner. This looks like a date." "Does it? How unfortunate. I was aiming for professional celebration between CEO and auditor on the eve of contract completion. I must have overshot." But his eyes sparkled with barely suppressed humor. She sat down, accepted the wine glass he poured. "You're incorrigible. I'm hopeful. There's a difference." He raised his glass. "To truth, to justice, to thorough investigations that expose murder and solve embezzlement despite deliberate sabotage, and to investigators who don't run when things get complicated. To CEOs who choose integrity over legacy," she countered, "and who trust people enough to let them find uncomfortable truths." They touched glasses, drank. And in that moment, the professional distance that had defined 6 weeks dissolved like sugar in rain. "So," he said, "tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., your contract officially ends. Which means at 9:01 a.m., I'm allowed to ask the question I've been holding since that airport lounge at 4:30 in the morning. You've been counting down? To the minute. He set down his glass. Imani St. Clair, when I met you, I was running from everything. Responsibility, truth, the fear of being unworthy of my father's legacy. You asked if I was running from someone or myself, and that question changed my entire trajectory. You showed me what choosing integrity looks like even when it costs everything. You gave my father justice and my brother grace. And somewhere in all of that, I fell for you in ways I didn't know were possible. He took a breath. I know the timing is terrible. I know your career is in crisis. I know we met under circumstances that make everything complicated. But I also know that extraordinary things happen at 4:30 a.m. in airport lounges when two strangers tell each other the truth. So I'm asking, when this is over, when you've figured out what comes next for your career, when enough time has passed that dinner won't be scandalized as the investigator dating her former subject, will you let me take you out properly? As just Junwoo and just Imani? Two people who accidentally sat next to each other and found something worth surviving a crisis for? Imani set down her glass. Her heart hammered. Every professional instinct she'd ever developed screamed caution. But underneath that, underneath years of walls and careful distance, and the fear of repeating the pharmaceutical case's mistakes, was something she'd been ignoring since that dawn encounter. She felt something for this man. Something real and complicated and terrifying in its intensity. Ask me again, she said softly. Tomorrow, at 9:01 a.m., when the contract officially ends and there's no ambiguity about professional ethics. Ask me then, and I'll give you a real answer. Not a maybe in a few months when things calm down answer. A real answer, yes or no, final. You're really going to make me wait until 9:01 tomorrow morning? I'm going to make sure that when I answer, it's the version of me answering who isn't defined by crisis or scandal or investigation. Just Imani, making a choice about just Junwoo. She smiled. That's worth one more night of waiting, don't you think? I think you're wise and maddening in equal measure. That's my charm. They ate dinner on that rooftop, talking about everything except the investigation for the first time since they'd met. She told him about growing up in 3 different countries, about choosing auditing because patterns made sense when people didn't, about the pharmaceutical case and the guilt she still carried. He told her about the pressure of inheriting an empire at 35, about watching his father work himself to exhaustion, about Minho's insecurities and how he'd never known how to bridge the gap between protective older brother and supportive equal. They talked until Seoul's lights blurred and the wine bottle emptied, and the distance between them felt like the only dishonest thing left. I should go, she said finally. Let you get sleep before tomorrow's official contract termination. He walked her to the rooftop door. Imani? She turned. Whatever you answer tomorrow at 9:01, I want you to know that meeting you was worth every complication, even if your answer is no, even if we never sit together again. That conversation at dawn gave me something I'd lost, the belief that integrity still matters. Thank you for that. You had that belief before you met me. I just reminded you it was worth the cost. Maybe we reminded each other. She left him standing on that rooftop, Seoul spread behind him like a kingdom he'd saved through courage she'd helped him find. And as she rode the elevator down, she already knew what her answer would be at 9:01 the next morning. She just needed to figure out how to say yes without betraying every professional principle she'd built her life on. Or maybe she needed to learn that professional principles and personal happiness weren't always mutually exclusive. Maybe integrity meant being honest about what she felt, instead of hiding behind rules designed for different situations. Maybe meeting Junwoo at 4:30 a.m. in an airport lounge had been the universe's way of saying, "You've survived enough. Now learn to live." Tomorrow at 9:01, she'd give him her answer. And tomorrow at 9:02, they'd both find out if what they'd built in crisis could survive the terrifying normalcy of actual happiness. 9 a.m. Imani sat in a cafe across from Hansong Tower, watching the clock on her phone with the focus of someone defusing a bomb. Her contract officially ended in 60 seconds. After that, she was no longer Kang Junwoo's investigator. She was just a woman who'd completed a job and was trying to figure out what came next. Her phone buzzed. Yara. It's 9 a.m. in Seoul, which means you're either freaking out or you've already made a choice. Please tell me you're choosing happiness for once in your life. She typed back. Define happiness. The thing you deserve but keep running from because you're afraid of losing control. Say yes, babe. Life's too short for professional ethics to block personal joy. 9:01. Her phone rang. Junwoo. She answered. You're very punctual. I've been watching the clock since midnight. His voice was nervous in a way she'd never heard from him. Can I see you? In person? Or would you prefer to answer over the phone so you can hang up quickly if the answer is no? Meet me outside Hansong Tower. Main entrance, 5 minutes. She crossed the street, heart hammering in a way that had nothing to do with traffic. When she arrived, he was already there. Suit perfectly tailored, hairstyled, every inch the CEO except for his eyes. Those were all human. All vulnerable. All hopeful and terrified in equal measure. Imani. Junwoo. They stood on the sidewalk as Seoul moved around them, two people suspended in a moment that would define everything that came after. I have a question to ask you, he said formally. But before I do, I need you to know something. I've spent 3 years trying to be worthy of my father's legacy, trying to prove I deserve the trust people placed in me. And I realized something while waiting for 9:01. I was measuring worth by the wrong metrics. Worth isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest, about choosing truth even when it's terrifying, about trusting people to see you fully and hoping they don't run. You taught me that. I think we taught each other. Maybe. He took a breath. Imani St. Clair, you sat down next to me in an airport lounge at 4:30 in the morning when we were both running from versions of ourselves we didn't want to be. You asked me a question that changed my life. And then you stayed, through scandal and murder and every complication the universe could throw at us, because you believe truth matters more than comfort. I'm asking now, not as CEO to investigator, not as subject to auditor, but as Junwoo to Imani. Would you have dinner with me? Not because we survived a crisis together, because I want to know who you are when you're not fighting. I want to learn what makes you laugh when you're not carrying the weight of investigation. I want to see if what we found at dawn can survive daylight. The question hung between them. Dangerous and perfect. Imani had spent 34 years building walls. Professional distance. Emotional control. The careful architecture of a life designed never to be vulnerable enough to be devastated like she'd been after the pharmaceutical case. And this man, this impossible, complicated, infuriatingly ethical man, was asking her to risk all of it. Yes, she said. He blinked. Yes? Yes, I'll have dinner with you. Not tonight, because we both need time to process the fact that the crisis is actually over. Not tomorrow, because I need to return to London and figure out what happens to my career. But next month, if you're still interested next month, when the scandal has faded and we've both had time to be people instead of CEO and investigator, ask me again then, and I'll say yes again. And we'll see if what we built in fire can survive the normalcy of just living. Next month, he repeated, like testing the words. And then yes? And then yes. He smiled, that real smile that transformed his face from CEO to human. That's a very cautious yes. I'm a cautious person. You knew that when you sat next to me in an airport lounge. I also knew you were extraordinary. That hasn't changed. He reached out, hesitated, then took her hand, the first time they'd touched beyond accidental brushes. His hand was warm, solid, real. 1 month. I'll wait 1 month. And then I'm taking you to the best restaurant in Seoul, and we're having the most normal, boring, wonderfully uncomplicated dinner 2 people have ever had. Boring sounds perfect. They stood on the curb outside Hanseong Tower, holding hands like teenagers, while Seoul moved around them in its efficient chaos. And for the first time in 6 weeks, Imani felt something other than the weight of investigation. She felt hope. Terrifying, fragile, real hope that maybe she could have both, professional integrity and personal joy. That meeting someone at dawn could lead somewhere other than complication and loss. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "I have a flight to London tonight, meetings with my firm tomorrow about what happens next for my career." "Will they take you back?" "I don't know. The scandal damaged their reputation by association. They might decide I'm more liability than asset." She squeezed his hand. "But I've survived worse. I'll figure it out." "And in 1 month?" "In 1 month I'll be back in Seoul. We'll have that boring dinner, and we'll find out if we're as good at normal as we were at crisis." He raised her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles. Old-fashioned, courtly, completely at odds with his modern CEO exterior. "Thank you. For sitting next to me when you could have chosen any other seat. For staying when you found out who I was. For fighting for truth, even when it cost you everything. And for saying yes, when you could have protected yourself by saying no. Thank you for being worth the risk." She pulled her hand free gently, walked away before she could change her mind or complicate things with more words. But she turned back once, caught his eyes across the distance. He was still standing there, watching her go, looking like a man who'd just been given something he didn't know how to hold without breaking. She knew the feeling. The cafe in Hongdae was exactly as Imani remembered. University students studying, freelancers on laptops, the comfortable hum of people building lives one coffee at a time. She sat at the same corner booth where she'd confronted Minho about the signatures a year ago. But this time, she wasn't carrying investigation files or evidence of corruption. She was carrying a published report that had changed her career in ways she never expected. The scandal had been brutal for 3 months. Every major business publication questioned her ethics. Her firm in London had suggested she take an extended sabbatical until public attention shifted. She'd resigned instead, unable to work for people who cared more about reputation than truth. For 2 months, she was professionally adrift. No cases, no income. Just the slow burn of realizing that sometimes doing the right thing meant losing everything you'd built. Then the prosecutor's trial brief against Park became public. Every piece of evidence she'd found, every methodology she'd used, every careful documentation of her investigation was examined in open court. The judge's ruling was scathing. Ms. St. Clair's investigation represents the gold standard of forensic auditing under hostile conditions. Any suggestion that personal connection compromised her work is refuted by the evidence itself, which is meticulous, unbiased, and irrefutable. After that, everything changed. 3 firms offered her senior positions. A Korean business university invited her to teach investigative methodology. And most surprisingly, 5 corporate boards requested her as independent auditor, specifically because she'd proven she couldn't be intimidated, bought, or discouraged by scandal. She'd accepted one of the Korean board positions, built a small independent practice in Seoul, and discovered that the city she'd come to for 6 weeks had somehow become home. The cafe door opened. Junwoo entered, spotted her immediately, smiled in that way that still made her heart do complicated things. He slid into the booth across from her. "Sorry I'm late." Minho's presentation to the shareholders ran long. How'd he do? Brilliantly. The new compliance systems he designed are being adopted across the industry. He's become the unlikely face of corporate accountability reform. Pride colored his voice. He's finally comfortable in his own competence instead of performing someone else's expectations. That's good. He deserves it after everything. Junwoo reached across the table, took her hand. A casual gesture now, comfortable after a year of dinners and conversations and slowly building something real outside of crisis. "How was your morning?" "Productive. The audit I'm running for that pharmaceutical company, I found some irregularities. Nothing criminal yet, but enough to warrant deeper investigation." She paused. I called the CEO directly, told him what I found, and gave him the chance to explain before I documented anything officially. That's different from your usual methodology. I learned something from the Hanseong case. Sometimes people make mistakes without malicious intent. Sometimes they're being manipulated. Giving them the chance to explain before assuming criminality. It's more fair, more accurate. She smiled. Someone taught me that thoroughness means investigating intent, not just actions. Wise teacher. He has his moments. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from a year of learning each other's rhythms outside of danger and investigation. I have something for you, Junwoo said. He pulled an envelope from his jacket, slid it across the table. Inside, a photograph. 4:30 a.m. in an airport lounge, taken by the same security cameras Park had used for blackmail. But this print showed the full context. Two exhausted people in a public space, sitting together but separate, both looking like they'd found brief refuge in unexpected conversation. Nothing scandalous, nothing inappropriate, just human connection in an inhuman hour. Where did you get this? I requested the full security footage from that morning, had this frame printed. He pointed to the timestamp. 4:37 a.m., the moment right after you asked if I was running from someone or myself. Look at my expression. She looked. In the photo, Junwoo's face showed something raw. Surprise, recognition, the beginning of trust, like he'd just been seen for the first time in years. That's the moment, he said quietly, when I realized you were different from everyone else in my life, that you asked real questions instead of safe ones, that you'd confront instead of enable. He took the photo back, looked at it like a talisman. I keep this in my office, as a reminder that integrity sometimes arrives at 4:30 a.m. in the form of a stranger who refuses to let you hide. That's very romantic for a CEO. I learned from an excellent auditor that being CEO doesn't mean being inhuman. It means being honest about carrying weight. He tucked the photo away. Speaking of which, I have a question. Another one. You ask a lot of questions for someone who spent 6 weeks avoiding them. This one I've been planning for 3 months. He pulled out a small box, velvet, old-fashioned, completely incongruous with the casual cafe setting. Imani's breath caught. Junwoo, wait. Before you panic. This isn't a ring. I'm not proposing in a cafe booth. I'm not that unromantic. He opened the box. Inside, a key. Simple, silver, modern. This is a key to my apartment. I'm asking if you want to move in. Not because it's convenient or expected after a year. Because I want to wake up next to someone who makes me want to be better. I want to come home to a person who'll call me on my bullshit and remind me that truth matters more than comfort. I want to build a life with you that doesn't require crisis to justify connection. She stared at the key. A year ago, this would have terrified her. Commitment meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant the potential for loss. And she'd spent a career avoiding both. But she'd also spent a year learning that some risks were worth taking. That building walls kept her safe but also kept her alone. That meeting someone at dawn could be the universe offering grace instead of complication. Yes, she said. Yes? Yes, I'll move in. Not today. I need to finish the pharmaceutical audit. But next month. We'll move my stuff, merge our lives, and figure out what it looks like to be two people who choose each other daily instead of just surviving crises together. His smile could have lit entire cities. Next month, I can work with that timeline. You're very patient for someone who waited precisely 1 minute after contract termination to ask me to dinner. I've learned patience. You taught me that too. They finished their coffee, paid the bill, walked out into Seoul's afternoon sunshine. And as they moved through the city together, hands linked, conversation easy, two people who'd found each other at 4:30 a.m. and decided to see where dawn led, Imani felt something she hadn't felt since before the pharmaceutical case. Peace. Not the absence of challenge, but the presence of someone who made challenges feel survivable. Her phone buzzed. Yara. I saw the photo you sent of the apartment key. Finally. I was starting to think you'd died and been replaced by a robot who only understood professional ethics. When's the move? Imani typed back. Next month. And I'm still the same person. No, you're not. The same person would have said, I need 6 months to evaluate whether cohabitation aligns with my 5-year plan. You said yes immediately. That's growth, babe. I'm proud of you. It wasn't immediately. It took me at least 30 seconds. Growth. Junwoo glanced at her phone. Yara? Yara. She's threatening to fly to Seoul to organize the move herself if I don't send her photographic evidence of domesticity within 2 months. I like her. She keeps you honest. She keeps me human. There's a difference. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the Han River, where Seoul's heart beat in rhythms of water and light. They stopped at the railing, watching boats move across the surface like thoughts across consciousness. Can I ask you something? Junwoo said, and you can tell me if it's too heavy for a Saturday afternoon. Ask. Do you ever regret it? Sitting next to me in that airport lounge? Everything that happened after. The scandal, losing your firm, the months of uncertainty. If you could go back, knowing what it would cost, would you choose a different seat? She thought about that. Really thought about it. No, she said finally. Because that conversation, those 20 minutes at dawn, they reminded me why I do this work. Not for reputation or accolades or the satisfaction of being right. For moments when truth matters more than comfort. When integrity costs something but feels worth it anyway. You reminded me of that. And everything that came after, the scandal, the loss, the rebuilding. It was the price of living by the principles I claim to value. She turned to face him. So no, I wouldn't choose a different seat. I'd sit down next to you every time, even knowing what it would cost. Because some coincidences aren't coincidences. They're the universe saying, here, this is what you need, even if it's not what you wanted. That's very philosophical for an auditor. I contain multitudes. He laughed, pulled her close, pressed a kiss to her forehead. Affection that had become natural over a year of learning each other's languages. I'm glad you sat down next to me. Even when I'm frustrated by your thoroughness and your questions, and your inability to let things be simple when they're complicated. And I'm glad you asked if I was running from someone or myself, even when I'm frustrated by your tendency to carry everything alone, and your belief that protection means isolation, and your CEO habit of turning emotions into logistics. We're a disaster together. We're a work in progress. There's a difference. They stood at the railing as Seoul moved around them. Two people who'd found each other in crisis and chosen to build something in calm. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. But it was real. And real, Imani had learned, was worth more than any carefully constructed fiction. Her phone buzzed again. This time, not Yara. Da-un. Emez. St. Clair, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to share news. I've been promoted to Director of Corporate Integrity at Hanseong. Part of the restructuring after everything that happened. I wanted to thank you. Your investigation didn't just expose corruption. It created space for people like me to build something better. If you ever need a reference or just want to catch up, I'm here. Lee Da-un. Imani showed the message to Junwoo. Your company is in good hands. Our company, he corrected gently. You're on the advisory board now. That makes it partly yours too. I'm an independent auditor on the advisory board. That's very different from ownership. You're the person who saved the company from destroying itself. That's a different kind of ownership. She couldn't argue that. They left the river as sunset painted Seoul in shades of amber and gold, the city transforming from business hub to something softer, more forgiving. They walked back toward Junwoo's apartment, soon to be their apartment, talking about nothing important and everything that mattered. Dinner plans. Weekend trips to Busan they kept postponing. The book Imani was writing about investigative methodology under hostile conditions. Minho's upcoming wedding to a lawyer he'd met during the corporate reform seminars. The foundation Junwoo was building in his father's name, scholarships for ethics students, funding for whistleblower protection programs, support for families affected by corporate corruption. Normal things, boring things. The beautiful, mundane architecture of a life built outside crisis. When they reached the apartment building, Junwoo paused at the entrance. "I have one more thing to give you." "Another key? How many apartments do you have?" "Just one, but this isn't a key." He pulled out a small leather journal, worn at the edges. "This was my father's, the one you found during the investigation. I've been reading it, really reading it, not just searching for evidence. And I found something on the last page. Something he wrote the day before he died." He opened to the final entry. Chairman Kang's handwriting, still steady despite the weight he must have been carrying. "If I'm right about PTJ, tomorrow will be difficult. I'll confront him with the audit findings. He'll either explain legitimately or reveal himself as the betrayer I fear he's become. Either way, I'll know the truth. And truth, however painful, is the foundation of integrity. I built this company on principles I want my sons to inherit. If those principles were built on lies I didn't see, then I'm grateful I'll learn that now while I can still fix it. Better late truth than comfortable ignorance. I hope my sons remember that." Imani read it twice, feeling the weight of a dead man's final wisdom. "He knew," she said softly. "He knew the truth might destroy everything. And he pursued it anyway. He pursued it because he wanted to leave us something real instead of something pretty." Junwoo's voice was thick with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "I think he'd like you. I think he'd appreciate that you did what he was trying to do. Find truth no matter the cost. I think he'd be proud of you for continuing that work even when it meant exposing family secrets and losing the comfortable version of his legacy." They stood in the fading light, holding a dead man's journal and the lessons it taught about integrity, sacrifice, and the courage to confront instead of avoid. "Come on," Junwoo said finally. "Let's go upstairs. I'll make dinner. And before you make that face, I've been taking cooking lessons. I can make exactly 3 dishes now without setting off smoke alarms." "3 dishes? You're practically a chef." "I'm a CEO learning to be human. It's a process." They rode the elevator up to the penthouse, and when the doors opened, Imani felt something shift. This wasn't just Junwoo's space anymore. It was becoming theirs. A place where an auditor and a CEO could build something that didn't require crisis or scandal or the intensity of investigation to justify its existence. Just 2 people who'd met at 4:30 a.m. and decided that sometimes the universe knew what it was doing when it put strangers next to each other in airport lounges. 2 years later, the Incheon Airport VIP lounge looked exactly the same. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing runways wet with October rain, expensive silence, leather seating arranged in quiet corners. Imani sat in the same section where she'd sat 3 years ago, nursing ginger tea and reviewing case files on her iPad. But this time, she wasn't alone. Junwoo sat beside her, closer than professional distance, comfortable in the proximity that came from sharing an apartment and a life, and 2 years of learning that love outside crisis was harder but more rewarding than either had expected. "Déjà vu," he said, gesturing to the lounge. "Same spot, same rain, same ungodly hour. Not quite the same. 3 years ago you were running from responsibility. Now you're running toward it." She gestured to the stack of documents in front of him. Plans for Hansong's expansion into sustainable technology, proposals for industry-wide ethics standards, drafts of the speech he'd deliver at tomorrow's International Business Summit. "I'm not running. I'm traveling efficiently. You're going to Berlin to convince European investors that Korean chaebols can be transparent and ethical. That's running toward something most people would avoid. I learned from an excellent teacher that avoiding things because they're difficult is just another form of running." She smiled. Wise teacher. She has her moments. They sat in comfortable silence, watching early morning travelers move through the lounge with the exhausted efficiency of people for whom airports were second offices. "Do you ever think about it?" Junwoo asked. "That morning, 3 years ago, how different everything would be if you'd chosen a different seat." "Sometimes. But then I remember I didn't choose randomly. I chose the quietest corner with the best work setup and the fewest people. Professional efficiency led me to you. Maybe that's the universe's way of saying that being true to yourself leads to what you need." "That's very poetic. I've been spending too much time with a CEO who thinks emotions are logistics. It's made me softer. I think you've made me softer. I cried at Minho's wedding last month." Everyone cried at Minho's wedding. He cried before the bride even appeared. Still counts as emotional growth. Imani's phone buzzed. Message from Yara. "I see you posted airport lounge photos. Are you two doing some kind of romantic anniversary recreation? Because that's adorable and I'm judging you affectionately." She showed Junwoo the message. He laughed. "Should we tell her we're just here because we have flights? Let her think we're romantic. It's good for her faith in love. We are romantic. I brought you tea without being asked. You brought yourself tea and grabbed one for me because I was sitting next to you. That's efficiency, not romance. I'm a CEO. Everything I do is efficient, including falling in love with an auditor at 4:30 in the morning." She leaned against his shoulder, let herself be held in the quiet of pre-dawn, and thought about how far they'd come. From strangers to crisis partners to this, two people who'd learned to be soft with each other, even when the world required them to be hard with everyone else. Park Tae-jin was serving a life sentence for murder, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The trial had been brutal, public, and thorough. Every detail of his 30-year betrayal exposed for the world to judge. Chairman Kang's legacy had been complicated by the revelations, but ultimately strengthened. A man who died trying to stop corruption was more heroic than a man who'd built perfection without flaw. Minho had become exactly what Junwoo hoped: confident without arrogance, competent without insecurity, a leader who'd survived manipulation, and chose to build systems that prevented others from being similarly victimized. Hansung had restructured completely. Transparent governance, mandatory external audits, whistleblower protections, a corporate culture that valued integrity over comfort. It was smaller now. Some divisions sold off, some partnerships dissolved, but it was clean. And clean, they'd all learned, was worth more than big. Imani's career had evolved in directions she never anticipated. Her practice was small, but prestigious. Corporations hired her specifically because she couldn't be intimidated or compromised. She'd published 2 books on investigative methodology. She taught 1 semester a year at Seoul National University, training the next generation of auditors who'd choose truth over reputation. And she'd learned something she'd spent 34 years avoiding: that letting someone in didn't mean losing herself. That vulnerability was strength in disguise. That choosing love didn't compromise integrity. It gave integrity something worth protecting. "We should board soon," Junwoo said, checking his watch. "Your flight to Singapore leaves in an hour. Mine to Berlin in 90 minutes. Different continents for a week. We've gotten terrible at this cohabitation thing. Or we've gotten good at maintaining independence while building interdependence. That's growth. You sound like a psychology textbook. I've been reading the books you leave around the apartment. You're a bad influence on my CEO stoicism." They gathered their belongings, prepared to separate for a week of work in different time zones. But before they left, Junwoo pulled her close, pressed his forehead to hers in the gesture that had become their private language. "Imani St. Clair, you sat down next to me 3 years ago and asked if I was running from someone or myself. I want to give you the answer I didn't know then. I was running toward you. I just didn't know it until you were already there." That's the most romantic logistical statement I've ever heard. "I'm evolving." She kissed him, brief, soft, the kiss of 2 people who knew they'd be together again in a week and didn't need grand gestures to confirm what they'd built. "Go convince Europe that ethics are profitable," she said. "I'll go audit a pharmaceutical company and try not to find murders this time." Please don't find murders. I'm not sure our relationship can survive another scandal. Our relationship survived the first scandal. I think we're scandal-proof now. They separated at the gate, heading to different planes, different continents, different investigations and responsibilities, but connected by something they'd found at 4:30 a.m. in an airport lounge when two strangers told each other the truth because anonymity made honesty safe. That truth had become the foundation of everything after. Not the comfortable version, not the easy story. The real truth, that integrity cost something. That love required vulnerability. That the best things in life came from choices that terrified you. Imani boarded her plane, settled into her seat, opened her investigation files. But before she dove into work, she pulled out the photograph Junwoo had given her a year ago. The two of them in that airport lounge, 4:30 a.m., the moment when everything changed without either of them knowing it yet. She'd learned something from that photo, from that moment, from everything that came after. The universe didn't make mistakes. It put people where they needed to be, when they needed to be there, next to who they needed to meet. The rest, the scandal, the investigation, the choice to say yes or no, that was up to them. She'd chosen yes. At 9:01 a.m. when her contract ended. In a cafe when he offered a key. At 4:30 this morning when he asked if she ever regretted sitting down next to him. Yes. Always yes. To truth and vulnerability, and the terrifying, beautiful work of building a life with someone who made you want to be brave. The plane lifted off, Seoul disappearing below in a spread of lights that looked like stars someone had spilled across the earth. And Imani closed her eyes, smiled, and thought about the dinner they'd share next week when they were both home. Boring, domestic, wonderfully uncomplicated. The kind of boring she'd learned to love more than any crisis, any investigation, any achievement her career could offer. Because sitting down next to Kang Junwoo at 4:30 a.m. in an airport lounge hadn't just changed her trajectory. It had changed her understanding of what success meant. Not reputation, not perfection. Not the armor of professional distance, but the courage to be seen, the strength to be vulnerable, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the most important choice you make is simply where you sit when you're too tired to guard your heart. She'd sat next to him. He'd immediately felt she was the one. And 3 years later, sitting beside him had become the most natural thing in her world. This story explored how two people, both carrying their own fears and responsibilities, found each other at the most unexpected moment and built something real through crisis, choice, and the consistent decision to choose truth over comfort. Imani learned that professional integrity and personal connection weren't mutually exclusive. Junwoo learned that strength meant vulnerability, not isolation. And together, they proved that sometimes the universe knows